Thank you for tuning into the SeaBros Fishing Podcast. On this episode, we are excited to sit down and talk everything bluefin tuna with our good friend and fellow fisherman, Chris Weiner. Chris and the rest of his family are harpoon fishermen out of Maine and have been for decades. His experience and skills in hunting these fish on the surface is incredible. He is on another level in terms of understanding bluefin behavior, patterns, and nuances. When Chris is not on the water pursuing these fish from above, he uses the rest of his bandwidth supporting his fellow bluefin tuna fishermen. His family have always been advocates for the fishery and have been doing this a long time. Chris has spent many years involved in both the science and management pertaining to numerous Gulf of Maine, East Coast, and Atlantic-wide fisheries. He is currently on the advisory committee to the U.S. section to the International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas, also known as ICAT, the Maine Offshore Wind Fisheries Working Group, the Maine Offshore Wind Research Consortium, and in recent years he has served lengthy terms on the Maine Department of Marine Resources Advisory Council, the NOAA Highly Migratory Species Advisory Council, and the New England Fishery Management Council's Herring Advisory Panel. Over the past 3 years, Chris and his father spearheaded the development of a nonprofit organization known as the Bluefin Collaborative, whose focus is to connect bluefin tuna fishermen up and down the East Coast and work towards building a genetic database on harvested and released fish. These efforts are to help showcase the health of the Atlantic bluefin tuna stock, pinpoint new spawning areas, and gather new migration data on these species. Over the past 2 seasons, we have helped collect samples for Chris and the Bluefin Collaborative, taking fin and finlet clips from fish we have caught throughout our charter fishing season. We're excited to continue this for years to come and help refine the sampling process with Chris and the rest of the Bluefin Collaborative team. In this conversation, we discuss international bluefin tuna quota management, highly migratory species politics, old data sets versus what is being collected by the Bluefin Collaborative, and much more. As always, we share a bunch of fish stories, including Chris's first experience fishing in Nova Scotia this past fall. Chris is a very smart and passionate guy and has a ton of information to share. We hope you enjoy this podcast as much as we did. Welcome to the SeaBros Fishing Podcast, where we follow 3 words of wisdom. You can't catch them if you don't have a hook in the water. Always trust your instincts. And the last, you'll just have to keep listening. Stay tight.
Yep, that's the one. That's the real one. Oh. Get up there, man. All right, get down low. All right, down low. Oh, doubled up. We doubled up. All right. Am I coming off or what? Get that down. Don't get on that rock.
You'll probably get this right away.
You want to leave the screen on or turn it off?
I'm going to shut it off.
Okay.
You take your time. No rush. Think about it. It's a type of fish.
Is it like a part of a fish, or is it
Part of a fish.
a fish that, like a common fish?
Not really.
Not super common. You have them in the rivers in Maine, I think. We have them in the river.
Oh, sturgeon.
Yes.
We have tons of them.
Do you?
Like there's one day we were sitting at the beach in Scarborough, right near your friend's house, or when I picked up those kits. Who's that again? Was that family or friend? Brother-in-law.
Sister-in-law.
So like right near there's if you keep going towards the south, there's Ferry Beach, and it's confusing because across the way there's a Ferry Beach in Saco too.
Yeah.
But Ferry Beach in Scarborough, we were sitting there one day and it was just like, there's fucking jumpers right there. It's like, and then I kept paying attention and it was like, if they weren't all 10 to 15, 20, like giant.
That's
they just
wild.
do this one thing, they just come out and
Slap.
slap.
Are they cleaning themselves off or something?
I don't know what they're doing, but it's like, and then Heather's cousin, who we see a lot because she lives near us, wicked observant, and she started talking about it, and it was like,
Throw this stuff.
cause I was kind of thinking to myself, like, am I hallucinating? Like, what? They look like sturgeon, and they look huge, and they were everywhere, and it's a main thoroughfare, and yet I'm told they're endangered. And then it turns out everywhere I go, not this year, but a couple years in a row, there was everywhere. But there was a kid in our harbor who now goes out of New Hampshire who set like a bait gill net literally outside of Perkins Cove one morning.
Mm-hmm.
Got like 50 sturgeons, like which is like the number
Wow.
one surgeon they say around Earth. Like that was like it was like and it started. Yeah, they get huge and they jump and it's like
They battle. No, leave it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Our YouTube presence isn't quite what the audio presence is, so
The audio presence,
worry about it.
total on the podcast, we have like 200,000 listens, full listens.
yeah. I haven't looked because like I didn't. It's like but I figured you guys have a good following in general.
It's solid. It's pretty much everyone that tuna fishes to some extent in the Northeast.
yeah, or at least
And-
somebody that knows somebody.
California, Florida, we have a lot of listens.
So that's the interesting thing is that California fishery and if you look at the management, it's like the same. It's like Japan and Mexico get like all of it, and then the U.S. like sacrifice their own fishermen, and it's like 300. Because I know that the Air Pilikia on Instagram, if you look him up, I'm sure you've seen him. He's like wicked good at aerial photography out there, and he's the ones that like he sees the schools like we have, and it turns out there's like gazillions, billions of. I mean, I don't know how many it is, but it's like there's so many off south, like L.A. Those places. Yeah, you should look up. It's like it's like Pilikia, Pilikia, and it's like Air Pilikia. It's like Carl, who I've been talking to a good amount, and it's like because he's very good. He actually flew for the Seiners here in like 2 years in 05 and 06.
Oh wow, those pictures are wild.
He's just getting better too as he goes. He's like a classic Southern California, like but hard going. Really, he flies for the sword fleet. Harpooners.
Yeah.
Turns out that it's almost as it's like what we have out here sometimes. Same issues, but it's just amazing how many bluefin are in the ocean. Because like I had been involved with tuna for my whole life, I'd never heard of bluefin off of L.A. And it's like,
But I feel like the whole bluefin off LA thing, from what I know about it,
yeah, and I don't know.
has become. It was crazy like 50 or 100 years ago, and then it's back on like an uptrend cycle.
Yep, it's
But I will say the fish are getting. It seems like the fish are getting bigger.
yeah,
doesn't
like
it?
I saw a video. They on Instagram. I'll just like scroll through the recommended, and there was one that was like the class, like what you see up in Canada here, and it was. And I looked at it because it was like I haven't seen that one before. This was last night, and I looked and it was California, and it was like it was one swimming around the boat, and they were just feeding it like we do up in Canada, and but it was pretty amazing to see it because it was definitely a big one, like a true big one.
Yeah, it's
and
wild.
I think it's just such a big ocean out there, and it's just catching on recreationally. But what I've been told is kind of one of the big changes was the Mexican fishery was humongous, and there was like a cutback in that. Like
Gotcha.
Like one side of Mexico, like our side of Mexico, doesn't have any real presence. They give I was actually at the meeting in 2010, and it was like Rich Rouet was sick, so it's like I had to go, and it was like in Paris, and it was Obama's first ICAT meeting. So it's like when he sent Jane Lubchenco, and I was in there. It's like you can't really. It's like the rules on ICAT are such.
Was this like pre-CITES listing issues or
everything kind of flared up at the same time because they had people in the, Obama's people were I won't name names, but like one of them is like Monica. So Biden's chief of staff and this guy Ron Klain, he was chief of staff when he was the vice president too. His wife Monica Medina is the appointed. She's like one of the classic big name. I'm not gonna say anti-fishing crusaders, but definitely like more save the fish as opposed to the fisherman. Like,
yeah,
definitely biased. I've never met her. I'm sure she's a perfectly, but her husband Ron Klain is Biden's chief of staff through all those years with Obama, and then the last 4 years she got appointed to the head position in the State Department. Because at ICAT it's like you have NOAA and then you have the State Department. It's because you're dealing with international treaties and negotiations. So not only does that mean like you're dealing with international quotas for tuna and every other species, but they also are always worried about how that deals with like war and like, crops that imports, exports. Yep. It's like it's geopolitical.
Yeah.
So the State Department is there too. So, and they kind of like, when you're in the room, like NOAA, it's like they lead the management part, but the power, like the secrecy, all of it is State Department. So you're not really supposed to even talk about what happens in meetings. But I was at that meeting, and basically the outcome was they wanted to cut the U.S. to show, like, which we always do, in my lifetime is lead. Same thing you do with, coal or oil. It's like, we'll go get rid of plants and then 10 more are being built in India and China a day. But we'll be out there saying like, we're better than them.
Yeah, we'll set the example.
Yeah, and no one gives a crap, and they keep doing, and then within our economy, so it's like whatever your position is on green energy, it's like that's what we do with fish too. Like the Europeans will be like, well, we want 50,000 tons, and the U.S. will be like, well, that's horrible. And the way they deal with it is by taking a cut, so then it looks like we're better than them, and it's like what they did was the agreement was 50 tons were taken off of us, given to Mexico, and then since then Mexico has given it most of it to Canada. So that's how they got Canada to agree, because the Canadians usually fight for the fishermen. Recently under Trudeau, it's been different, but before that, like I'd go to meetings and just be like so jealous of the Canadians because they'd have someone that really was like fair.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we want people there that are unfair. It's like you don't want, like, it's nice to have someone that just cares about fishing, but then you need fairness, and the Canadians like wouldn't go along with a cut. So it's like that's the kind of thing that happens, and so but on that one side of Mexico, so our side of Mexico, it's just a bycatch fishery in like the deep long line. But on the west side of Mexico,
is most of that initial like decision on how much they could harvest based on the fact that they breed down there?
Yeah, it's the first thing to know about ICAT is it's like, because there's so little science that's useful, it's basically politics. It's like, so you go to these meetings, so I do the science ones too. Like because of Zoom, I was allowed to, so I've been on the US delegation, which is kind of, can be annoying because, when you're on the delegation, you're part of the US, like I'm at home on my Zoom, but it's like if we were going to a meeting, I'd be part of like the US team, in an inner circle. So it's like, it's not like if you hire, you can be an observer at ICAT, and it's like kind of a lot of money and you have to like get vetted. But then you can go in and just be you. But I've been on these science ones, and it's like, there's a lot of science, good scientists, but like, there's so little, like, so all of the indices, and are we recording? Because I can get right in.
Yeah.
It's like, so, one of the reason, like the scary part about what's going on right now is that, I've talked to a few people recently that didn't know, so I might as well say it's like, no one really, I think, understands that how big of a discrepancy it is right now between the East and the West. Like the East is at its biggest quota ever. They're at like 40. I didn't check the exact number. I was going to, so I could be like 43,600, but it's like 44,000 metric tons this year. I was at the meeting. It was technically about, it was November of the year. So not this November, but the past November. So like 15 months ago. And it's like the ICAT meetings, like the annual meeting is always November. It's like right up to Thanksgiving. It's like, that's the one I went to in Paris.
Yep.
And it's there's a lot of lead up to it though, and but this was a big one a year and a half ago because we went to what they call a management strategy evaluation, which in the past you've basically had these political negotiations. So like people would go in, and that's how it got lopsided, because the EU always would go in and like fight for the fishermen, and that's how they got up to these huge numbers. And we would do the thing where we're like protecting it, and then you have lots of environmental campaigns that push our government to be that way. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's facts. It's like, it's like not conspiracy theory, it's the way it is. And, there's a lot of politics to it, but it's like, there was like some level of like, it happened in 2020, and it was important because they came out with an assessment. So when my brother died, it's like, I was in an ICAT meeting when I found out that he had a brain tumor. I was like in Georgetown walking around, and it's like, I got sick immediately. It's like, it was weird how it shot my immune system. Like I was the sickest I've ever been in my life the next morning. I wasn't even at all sick the day before. It was weird. And then I'm sitting in this ICAT meeting, like, and I just like couldn't hear. I was so sick. And it was like, and then I couldn't get to San Francisco. So I was just sitting there thinking, so I took 2 years off. And in those 2 years, it got to the point where like one of the ABTA people had called my dad, because we split off from that a while ago, and they had been following it, and it was like, we're about to get, a giant cut because they say there's no small ones. And so it turned out they thought there was 3,000 small ones. And it's like, you look into it and there's no science. It's like the reason they think that is because it's just basically the LPS, which is the Large Pelagic Survey. And then that's like the where they call you or they meet you at the dock. And if you look into it, it's just underfunded. They work hard, but it's like, they don't have it doesn't do anything. So it's to the point where ICAT has removed that. And then the small one, like they spent a year talking to the fishing industry to figure out how to like assess the data.
Yeah.
And it led to like normalcy. So there was like a level of like, there's a level of like human interaction that like when something was crazy, it's like we had a bunch that was 13 miles. Like Mike Leary, a pilot from Hampton, we had a day out in Murray's that year, it was literally that week. We just got shut down when all this happened and we were on land. And we had a bunch that I'll never forget it. It's like we were going up on like 8 of them. And we're like out way, I'd say 15 miles outside Murray's in the middle of nowhere, Mayo Swell kind of. And,
way east for those of you who don't understand the
yeah,
location.
like, and from Agunquit, it's like 85 miles and we go both ways. But, like we were out in the middle of nowhere and there's a bunch of like 8. And then it was like, oh, there's another one. And then there's like, oh, it's a bigger bunch than we thought. And it's like, and then it's like, there's another bunch. And then it turned out the whole ocean, I'm not exaggerating. The whole entire ocean was a bunch. Like everywhere you looked, every direction was a bunch. And in that same time, Mike Leary had seen a bunch that he's like very particular. It's like he knows fishery management. He's not a bullshit artist. And he measured it at like, can't forget, it's either 9 or 11 miles wide, the bunch. And then,
oh my
yeah, like, and I swear to God, if you ask Mike, I think it was 9 miles across, but when you got into the bunch, it was like 9 layers deep as far as you could see. And the one we got, it was really hard because you couldn't get behind them because like there was no behind. And so it was like an 82-incher. But then later that day, we found the absolute like bunches like that. And then this happened for days. Like we went for a month straight and there was everywhere you went, bunches of thousands and thousands of, 65 to 75-inch fish. And so it's like conservatively, it's like, and I'm not afraid to say this on record, there was hundreds of thousands within like 50 miles. And at the same time, we were hearing it was going off Chatham too. It's like, 50, 60 miles south of there. And then, offshore of there. And remember, there's like no airplanes anymore. So it's like, there's no one to really look around. And so this is just us out in the middle of nowhere. And it was just absolutely nuts. But then a week later,
and they're saying there's 3,000 total.
Yeah, so they don't like to. Yeah. So there was like, when we heard that, we were like, there was a, this kind of started before the ICAP meeting, but it was like when it got eventually to that year's ICAP meeting where we were facing a 30% cut. But this was this was 2020, so it was a lot of fish.
Yeah.
You guys were I don't need to tell you, there was a lot of tuna fish, and it was like the beginning of this historically large, and I'm conservative, like hundreds of thousands that spot that one day, a little part of the ocean, and we asked one of the head scientists, and they don't like to use assessments to give hard numbers because it's like really more of like the trends, but they can do it, and like so my dad asked that week, and this is the same week we got shut down again, the earliest we'd been shut down in like a decade, fish everywhere, very frustrated. And they said there was like the assessment said there was like, I think it was like 3,065 to 70-inch fish, something around that size range. Again, which I can tell you, there's days where we go out and see so many fish right below 73 in like the 65, 70-inch for like just miles and miles.
We had a few days like that last year, just like handful of boats on top of the bank as far as you could see. Inshore, as far as you could see. 47-inch fish to 75, 80-inch fish.
Yeah. And that's what's crazy about it. And it's like, but then you start looking into how they got to that number. All right. And it's like the LPS, which again, the folks at NOAA like tried really hard. And, but if you look at how do you count tuna by asking people what they caught? Well, the simple fact is that they don't do it in the harpoon category, but I dug into it. Like the simple thing is like at the beginning when they ask, or somewhere in it when they ask you what you were targeting, they only ask you what your top 2 targeting species. So like just think of like in the mid-Atlantic where a guy is going out to try to get big
blue marlin
and marlin and big eye. And then they run into like a month worth. So they're charters for a month or for those things, and every day they're seeing bluefin. There wasn't even a way to get that into the data. It's not asked. And so, and
even specifically for people targeting the rec size fish around here, I guarantee you it's a small percentage that actually reports them.
Yeah. And so it's
reports their releases.
I bet it's got to be less than 10%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like between releases and small fish, it's like there's so little, because the LPS is like, it's underfunded. It's like how do you survey the whole East Coast? And like, even I'd heard little stories, and nothing against the guy that was doing this in Point Judith, but one of the guys on the New England Council, who was not the type to say this without it being 100% true, because Point Judith historically has had obviously a big fleet, and the guy that was the LPS monitor in Point Judith this year, I was out, it was like 2020 again, because I was learning more about the LPS, and the guy would go home at 4 or 5. That was his shift. But all the boats were east of Montauk, got in at 8. So like he was saying, like, nobody in the tuna fleet's getting asked whether they went tuna fishing.
Yeah.
So there's those kind of things going on too. But it's like, really, there's no way of counting tuna right now. So the LPS, which is the large plate, and then we can, I don't want to beat this horse, but it's like the large pelagic survey is, for your listeners, is
you're not beating a horse. I think a lot of people
Most people don't know any of these
So
terms.
like the large pelagic survey is so with the lingo is like the way they manage tuna is like, in most species, is they have indices of abundance. So it's like they have an index, and then you always got to remind yourself it's not indexes, it's indices. But so they have different ones, and in the U.S., the Western Atlantic, the major indice, the biggest, the most important one has always been this large pelagic survey, because it was the only one that actually, so there's 2 of them, same everything, just there's split in the middle, there's the big ones and the little ones basically.
Yeah.
But same survey. It's like, and it's just like, and they use basically this, they call it catch per unit effort. So like they ask you, did you get one? And so like, putting aside how hard it is to ask enough people, and then as well as I do that, a lot of people at the end of a fishing day, like the last thing they want to do is tell the government what they did that day.
Yeah.
And then there's the paranoia of, if you tell them like you released 30 of them, is that going to hurt you? Because there was an issue that this happened before with the pelagic longline fleet like 10 years ago. That's like what it meant. I forget which amendment was, but there was a huge fight over longline discards. We're the only country in the world that has a longline fleet, other than maybe Canada, that reports those. But they were going to take 230 tons off of like the 1,000-ton U.S. quota to cover the discards, and so it became a big issue. So, but the fact is, like, so they have these indices of abundance, and so they then use those as like relative. It's an index, so it's like it's a relative index usually, because the other side of that would be an absolute index, which like would be like a hard count, which nobody has even come close. That's what kind of where we're going. But because you can't count them, you have these different effort indicators. And the large pelagic survey was literally thrown out by ICAT last year because it's no longer valid as a scientific tool. And it's like, I hate to have to say that, because like NOAA put a lot of time into it, but it's like even NOAA is like fully aware of that. And the other one we have is the same exact survey, but for small fish. So it's like, but you can't get rid of both of them or you have no index. So kind of they worked with the industry to try to understand the data. But the bottom line is that there is no way to count tuna effectively. So the other, just for reference, the other indices, one of them's that Mexican fishery that I was telling you about in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
They have a bycatch fishery, and so they're avoiding tuna on purpose. So that's their interactions is an index. So it's like a fishery that's trying to avoid bluefin.
They're using this information.
They're using that, like how many
Scary.
they see. So like, obviously I don't need to explain why that's scary. There's also there's also the Gulf of Mexico larval. And we can get into that at another point. But this idea that there's just 2 stocks and one of them only breeds in the Gulf of Mexico. Well, as a result, there's an index for the larvae, which you got to always remind people, like a larva, it's not like you think of like a bug, but it's just a baby tuna. It's like before they become like
it's eyeballs.
It's like you look at them and they're just
a jellyfish around.
It's really cool. It's just, and with bluefin or a swordfish, it's just a big eye and a tiny little tail, and it's just like before they become like an actual fish. So there's many years long, they use like bongo nets, they call them, and they count the larvae, which again is useless because it doesn't really tell you anything about fish breeding elsewhere. You don't really know how many of those larvae. You just know like relatively.
You're guessing at the survival
how many
rate.
there might be.
Right.
And then the kind of the gold standard, in my opinion, is the Southwest Nova logbook. So the Southwest Nova fishery, which we can get into, obviously, the actual fishing part is, they are very highly regulated. Like they have to call in each fish the second it happens. They have to have like a permit to charter or to release fish.
It's the same, essentially.
It's like PI.
It's the same thing.
So it's Canadian
They have
government.
to hail in
yeah.
every single
Day of what they're doing.
Yeah, not usually night before, whether they're going commercial or whether they're going charter for that day.
Right, and so they have they're and it's in Nova Scotia, they, as you know, it's limited access. So there's a set number of boats, and so they do 100% coverage, and it's a very rigorous logbook. So it's so rigorous that that's one of the accepted indices for abundance of so how many fish, and that one's been through the roof for 10 years, and it's so good that people will say we don't believe it.
It's crazy.
And it's like, let me tell you, it's like, we'll get into that, but it's like, it's real. Like, let me tell you.
Oh, yeah.
And if we had that same...
Every boat I've fished on there, it is on their dashboard, and they're filling it out like as you're letting
real.
it fish.
Like, it's like, and there's so... They don't even, you know... So it's like, we can get into the Canadian fishing, but it's like, long story short is that's only one index. And then there's also a Japanese... Because the Japanese are so integrated into ICAT, they have quotas on both sides of the imaginary line of east and west. And so they have a index based on their effort. They have like 400 tons. I forget. It's so hard to track from year to year, but they have a decent amount of bluefin on this side of the line, and that's one of their effort is one of the other indices. So you have like a middle of the ocean longline fishery that's like such a small fishery that it's like it's good, but it's not great. It's like it's just one little part, and then you have a larval survey. And then you have the LPS small fish survey, which again, its bigger fish counterpart is no longer accepted. It's not to crap on the people.
Canada's books.
It's neither of them are good because like how do you measure how many tuna there are based on randomly asking people like polling? It's notoriously hard. It's basically polling. Like you know when they've sampled 1,000 people. And they try to guess who's going to vote for who. It's like generally wrong. It's like there's biases. There's so many biases. It's very hard to do that. And when you think of our fishery, that's now from Florida to the furthest reaches of Maine, and like just look at Massachusetts around here. There's all these little inlets. I mean, guys come into places that aren't even harbors. The Cape's even more like that. It's like how are you ever going to accurately? Then people don't always tell the truth. Or it's confusing. And so there's no way to count tuna. And so that's kind of where we're at now, that what's happening, and this was said openly at one of our meetings, is we're basically this MSE, this management strategy evaluation, which is just another word for a computer program that takes the place of negotiating. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's got everything built in. It's like they basically have admitted there's so much uncertainty that the MSE takes like everything into account or tries to. And it's like a very elaborate, like complicated thing that assumes that we don't know a lot, and then it tries to punch out numbers that are safe. And what it really does is it averages everything out to the point where we're just catching what we've historically caught.
Yeah.
And so it's like in the craziest part, and then we can move on. It's like, so the East went at the meeting in 2022. We were fighting to keep basically the same, I would say, get a little increase. Despite the enormous amounts of fish that are out there. And the East, on the other hand, went up to, like I said, 43,000. We were around 2,500. It's complicated because there's a certain thing built into the Western Atlantic Agreement that between like 2,400 and 3,000, the allocation amounts change between countries. So the Japanese, because they helped us at some point in the past, we actually didn't get the increase we got because we hit there's like this 300-ton section of the quotas table that goes to Japan mostly if you hit that. So it's like,
so if you hit the threshold of increase, a percentage of your increase goes to another country.
Because Japan must have done something really helpful in the past, and you know the Japanese have helped protect tuna fishing for many years. So it's like we probably owed it to them. But it's like at the same time at that meeting, this is the craziest part. The model showed in this management evaluation, which is just again, it's really no different. It's just less humans, more computers. Instead of going to meetings and fighting over the numbers, you're fighting over like the few samples pumped out.
You're fighting over what the algorithm is.
And so they actually turned down 55,000 or 56,000 metric tons because they didn't have the capacity for anything over 43,000 or 44,000. So it's like, to put that in perspective, again, the U.S. gets about 1,300 metric tons. You know, Canada gets a little less than that. And, you know, the total Western Atlantic's at 2,500, just roughly. But they talk about it like there's no tuna here. And so it's like, we're not, we started the Bluefin Collaborative, which, I know we're here to talk about fishing, but it's like the Bluefin Collaborative started because you go to enough meetings and you see that we don't have any data. And then you start to get to know, instead of being confrontational, you get to know the scientists. And the younger ones, especially NOAA, are all dying for more data. And they're really like the first ones to tell you behind the scenes that, we really don't have, and take these guys that are, these people, these guys and girls, they don't just do tuna. It's like out of Miami, they're dealing with menhaden, they're dealing with snapper, they're dealing with like wind farms, they're dealing with councils. So it's like making, to get the story right on bluefin, not just numbers, but the other thing that matters, and then just it's the crash course, is you need to know how many there are roughly, and you need to know kind of how they reproduce. They call it like population structure, life history. Because like basically you need to know what you have and then how many of those might lead to. And then you also, there's other things, but that's the key. So you need to know when they mature. And one of the things that was long held was the idea that there's a line in the middle that was drawn in 82 and somehow the tuna was turning around, even though like everyone knows, if you look and go on the ICAT website and just look at the free publications and look at the 50s and 60s, they already knew that tuna are crossing the ocean. And somehow the management up until
probably more so now.
Yeah, and they made it to the whole world because the bluefin that you catch everywhere in the world started with the same bluefin. So it's like these things can move, and so it's like, but the U.S. basically drew a line down the middle in '82. I wasn't there, but my dad, who had helped start East Coast Tuna, it was like that's when like the main period of us being picked on started, was in the '80s, and they drew a line down the middle, and like to kind of it's like, I don't know if anyone intentionally did it or it just kind of like over time happened, but there was like certain things that came to be in the science world to justify that. And one of the ideas is that there's less, they reproduce slower here. So the idea that they only go to the Gulf of Mexico and they do it at 8 to 12 years old, so the big ones. And so they're like, oh, these things, they don't spawn that much. They spawn when they're up. But on the other side, it's 3 to 5 years old, and they're more like other tunas, which is like, it's basically based on temperature, currents, size. It's not like there's this one little, it's not like they're salmon, like they were trying to say with bluefin, that they go back to just the Gulf of Mexico and they only do it when they're old. And so the maturity thing in the spawning site fidelity, which is again, going back to the same spawning area, in that there's only 2 areas, that kind of helped reinforce this 2-stock theory, as it's called. And really what, though, it comes down to, despite not trying to offend any scientists here, it's not anyone's fault, but it's like when there's a lack of data, politics like walks right in the door. It's
Totally.
like, so in the EU, and it's nothing against our negotiators, like our current negotiator, great negotiator, but it's like there's like so much influence. Think about the EU, they have all of those northern Mediterranean countries, and then they also have the influence of Japan, who fishes in the east, China,
It's a lot more personalities.
and they have like badass, like full-blown out to protect their fishery negotiators that are ruthless. And so it's like, it's hard to even deal, but so it's like year after year after year after year, you've had us kind of leading by putting our chin out there, and saying we're going to protect the fish, which I'm not saying is we should just catch them all. It's like, this is what's happened, is we have done that and the other side has gone the other way. And so that line backfired, because you've lost control basically of how you manage it across the ocean. And we're just coming back. So the Bluefin Collaborative, like I said, and you guys have been a part of it, is the whole point of it is to get the data. And fishermen are the best data collectors. Data collection is what hinders science. When you talk to a scientist, a lot of time, the first thing they look at is how much is it going to cost to hire someone to go get the samples? Like, how am I going to get to the slope sea? How am I going to get the DNA samples? And so like we roll up, like you guys have been stars. You might get I think you're going to get the golds. Certainly individual operation star this year. I mean, you've got a lot of good competition, but the fin clip study that we've been doing, which we call it the tissue sampling project, but it's we're getting the yellow fins, as you guys know. And that's like, when we do that and we do it for free, and it's opening up doors that are like, you could get to the point where you're counting them using genetics.
Yeah.
And it's like super complicated to get into where genetics can play a role in this, but like you can do, if genetics is so complicated, but they don't even have the genome for Atlantic bluefin. So it's like, we're using the Pacific bluefin tuna, which is better than like using like the salmon genome. So like, but like it's still not even the Atlantic tuna. So the Atlantic bluefin tuna, and so genetics is where things are headed. Your listeners should know that. It's scary because before that, otoliths were the earbones were like you're gonna solve everything, and you probably didn't have to worry about it. But what they were doing, and it sounds really complicated. It's called microconstituent analysis. So you look.
Sounds complicated.
But what they were looking at is pollutants in the earbones, and they were saying we can see two distinct types of pollutants.
Oh, wow.
So therefore, there must be only two stocks. And I would sit at meetings, and I can't read the papers because it's all like, like Goodwill Hunting on the the chalkboard with like just equations, and it's like. But I would
picturing the meme of Zach Galifianakis.
Oh yeah, just like equations like falling down from the sky.
It's like I just would say like I'm just not, and I have to always say this because like I'm not a scientist, and it's like and I can't read your paper, but that sounds like to me if you go into that and it's not corrupt, it's not like people are doing this on purpose. But if you think there's two stocks, if you're so under the belief that there's two stocks and you go looking for two indicators. It's like, it just seems to me like given that no one can fact check this, that it could be wrong and you're just seeing what you want to see subconsciously. And it turns out that no one believes otoliths. Just within 10 years, that's already like so out the door but guess what?
Insane.
Genetics is going to fix everything. Right. And so we decided, and Molly Lukovich, who was one of, who's always been, doing a lot of good work. The first thing she mentioned to us was start getting samples. Don't worry about what you're gonna do with them. Just do it right. Do it professionally. If you want to have a seat at the table as an industry, not a bias seat, because science can't be like that. You can't. If we want to be successful, you guys are a part of this. We have to be neutral. And so there's a science advisory board. But what we can really do as fishermen is get samples, get the data, bring the scientists out, and then bridge the gap between us and them, because there's always a contentious relationship. Like with herring, it was like you could sense it in the air. It was so tense between like all of us and the herring scientist that I learned a lesson that's not going to get you anywhere. So it's like, and the guys down in Miami who often have been pitted against, are said to be pitted against. It's really like a lack of data. It's like, how can you manage these fish that can swim the ocean in 2 weeks? And are so complicated, and they can expand their habitat. They're in the UK, they're in Iceland, they're in Greenland, they're here in Brazil.
They're here until there's ice.
I don't know if they ever leave officially.
I'm not convinced they leave, especially out near George's. They might never leave.
Right.
And I saw one in the winter once. Like there are some that are always here, but the fact that they're just catching them. The guys that I talked to in Gloucester, that one of them, two guys that normally fish on different boats. Everyone would probably know both of them, but it's they went together, and it sounded to me like the tuna were there. It was just there were so many porbeagles that it was like 10 or 12 porbeagles, and they're like, that's it. It's January, it's icing. Let's call it a year. But if they wanted to keep doing that, and that's pain in the butt. I don't hook, so I don't know. But I can imagine porbeagles are a pain in the ass.
Yeah,
it's just they're tough fish, and so
yeah.
Which is interesting because you think they don't know a lot about bluefin. I was thinking that it's like, imagine how little we know about porbeagles.
There's really so many porbeagles.
I mean, nobody knows anything about porbeagles. They tried at one meeting. They were saying there was no blue dog. This was when the blue sharks were like you couldn't get away from them, and they were trying to list them. And then there was no spiny dogfish, and yet there'd be hundreds of miles of them on the ride home. But
this past year was brutal.
It's so frightening.
It is. It's scary.
Hearing that is frightening.
But I mean, to your point, just to circle back to Bluefin Collaborative, the data that we're collecting. It's really like one of the largest / the only thing we can do to try to protect this thing for no matter which way you're involved in.
Yeah, I know. It's so it's like that. The two things. So like the goals are, it's like build that rigorous sampling, and it's like by sampling I mean like get the obviously. I mean I sometimes jump around because like I'm so involved in this. But it's get the fin clips. So right now fin clips is it's what we're doing. I can't talk about it. We're not going to get into like how we're not going to just be okay with doing it the way everyone does it. So it's like, we've got other things cooking.
Constantly evolving.
There's other things that I can tell you.
We have a few opinions in our own.
There's some stuff that it's like, it's so secretive in the tuna world. I'm not going to say it here, but I'll tell you after. But it's like, there are ways that you can drastically improve different tools, and that allow not only easier so you get rid of any cross contamination. You not using fin clips basically. You get rid of cross contamination. You get rid of the pain in the butt. It's
the
not,
risk of death trying to release one.
That's what I was going to say is
I experienced that in the bigger boat, and it was difficult.
I did a
few, and I was like, I can't do this.
So the release fish thing is that's where, so it's like, I do think the new tools that we're testing right now, that's like geneticists, we're working with the University of Washington, which has a great fishery department, and they have a great PhD student, and it's all under, a pretty elite group of stock assessment scientists out there, but it's still like kind of in a formative stage. So I'm not going to sit here and name names. The best scientists, like I'm shocked at who we're working with, because bluefin is so contentious that there's only a few people that can handle it. And we found one, but it's, so there's doing some testing, but the gold standard to me is getting rid of, so cross-contamination, it's like, let's say, to make it simple, you have herring on your hand and you have your human oil on your hand and you touch the fin, like, that it's possible because they grind up the fin and they put it in like an enzyme. It's possible that they could have multiple species, the herring. So it's like, but there's also some debate as to whether there's computer methods to, counteract that, like by, breaking out the difference. So it's not like lose sleep over it, but you want to
You want the cleanest sample possible.
Exactly. And then the number one thing, though, is the live releases, because one of the things that, I'm not afraid to even say, because it's like, I don't think anyone else can do it if we can't do it. So it is this idea of genetic mark recapture. So to kind of like sum up where we're at. So because all of the indices, the ways to count fish are no longer really, and scare the hell out of you even worse, the Eastern indices are worse than ours. And yet they're at the highest numbers they've ever been. I don't even know how to explain that. It's just, I really can't. It's just the way things work. It's a remnant of how they're using past landings. So it's like the indices on the other side of the ocean are failing too, because it's hard to count tuna and it's limited budgets. And so, it's just as bad, but because our indices are failing, it's like we need one of the top things is you got to have a way to count them. And genetic mark recapture, it's like, so the idea of mark recapture is you put, in the old days, a spaghetti tag in it, and then you let it go. And then you see, you could theoretically, by seeing how many you get returned, if you do it representatively over time, space, area, you could tag this many, you get this many back, you could start to build an index, a relative index of how many might be out there. And the less recaptures you have, more fish you have. So it's like, if you released 50 with tags and got 50 back, you have 50 fish. But it's like if you release hundreds and hundreds of fish with tags and get like no returns, then there's a lot of fish. So you can do that with genetics. But you have to do the live releases. And there's no good way to do it, as you guys know, that's safe for the fish or the fishermen right now. There's literally no tools being used. The closest thing is this company, it's an acronym, it's CSIRO, it's like CSIRO. It's an Australian like spin-off of the government, and they're like in every type of management of like elephants, huge entity. They have like this really high-tech gun because they do southern bluefin.
Now we're talking guns.
So it's like
I want guns.
It's a handgun. So it's like a handgun that they pull them out and put them in. I don't know how they do this. I've never asked them, but they pull them out of the pens and in a cradle, and they have like a thing. It's a one-use tip. You just pop. It looks like it costs like $1 million. It's a beautiful.
I'm picturing the little cricket gun from Men in Black.
Oh yeah.
And it's basically at the prince, it's just like you guys know, when you get a dart back, let's say you double dart one, or for you guys to be darting it, but like if, when you dart one, I was calling it a double dart because on harpoon boats, like when we sometimes put a second dart in it.
We do it too and run.
Yeah. So it's like, eventually you'll get a dart back that, gets that pulled out somehow. And there's always tissue in that hole where you put the pike. And so, that's kind of where we were thinking. And then I found their prototype, which is like, again, it's like probably all licensed. It's like, it's made for ones that are in a pen. I don't think, you'd probably lose. It's probably so expensive that putting it over but the principle of it is that it's not when you go in with a dart that you get it. It's when you pull it out.
Oh yeah. We were literally just talking about this like yesterday.
And so like we're already in, like, obviously these are things that we'll all have, like, so in the fishing industry, like the other cool thing about the Bluefin Collaborative and is that we have lots of smart people that are good at lots of things. And the other way fishermen can help, so there's three ways. It's getting data innovating like with the tools. So we could build that tool
And methods.
methods.
Because along with getting live release samples comes best practices.
So how you release them.
Yeah.
So and it goes back to like and that's really critical and because it's like to get that accepted eventually you want to show. So you probably have to like and that's a good thing though, because like let's be honest, I'm not afraid to say our fishery would be there's a lot of people that could learn a lot about releasing fish properly. There's just by the amount of tuna we have in the ocean, there's exponentials. That's like saying literally. It's like there's a lot more people fishing like that.
I'd be confident in saying that over 90% of the people in our area that are giant bluefin / recreational bluefin, whatever, fishing, don't know how to release a fish.
It's hard. It's hard. And I saw like some data and there's a study going on and I talked to one of the captains and he's really good. It's like, you trust me. It's like, I don't want to say name, but it's like, you would go, yeah, they do it right. And 13, it was a 60, they're doing, it's out of the UMaine. It's like, I probably shouldn't even been told this, but I was. And so I'm not going to like say any more than what I know, which is that they released 13 fish with 60-day pop-up tags. And what was miraculous is that I think all the tags, so the problem with electronic tags, the satellite tags, is half of them break, almost half. And so, it was remarkable that they got 13 fish back, but all of them, it showed that if you do it right, they do live. And, it's like those were big fish, little, they know if you know what you're doing. And so, maybe as part of this, like if we instill the people, first of all, don't know how important it is probably to release them right. It's not like there's people out there there are some people that are probably like, screw the fish, but there are a lot of people that just don't realize how critical it is.
Yeah. Like, would you want to run a marathon and have zero recovery afterwards?
Especially the bigger the fish. Like, I can tell you from, like, when and we'll creep into it, it's like when we harpoon one, we have an electric harpoon, we call it, and it's like, if it works, the fish just roll, no matter how big, it's just done. It's not as powerful as some where you see them, like, almost, like, explode out of the water. Like, it's like, but ours is pretty powerful, and it's like, and we got a more powerful one recently. It's like to the point where it's like we have a delay built into it, which is a second. In my dad, it's like we have a fight about it. Like
so that you don't come crashing down the pulpit.
Well, I don't want to get zapped. I've been zapped. I'm not gonna name name, but like what the driver had his jacket caught. We have a trick. We have like a lot of people have a button, but we have so on our boat the driver in the tower. Some guys do it in the stand, and so which has its advantages. But on our boat, it's like the driver does the button and we don't have we have a switch and then we have a trigger that you pull and his jacket got caught on it and it's like we had an older one that would wind up a little bit, so it's like it would take a few seconds to get to that full power, which I liked. So I just like it's like but a guy in our harbor actually had the story is he went to throw in really good fisherman Dougie Gary, and I don't who knows, but it was before my time. But his dad invented the electric harpoon, so it's like his dad was the guy that started it, and his Dougie Gary's out of Perkins Cove, just a really clever family, and so they had a really strong one for so he built it in like the 70s, which you can imagine like when someone
they wanted to explode the fish.
They're getting skeletons
back.
back.
Can you imagine when they also had a fast boat, and it's like they were very innovative, but like there's a story that Dougie went to throw with a new guy, like he brought a guy with him. And he went to throw and didn't throw, and the guy hit the button and his shoe blew off. So it's like that, it's like, but I can just tell you, when it works though, it's like, but when it doesn't work, we call it putting out a flag. We've got a lot of rope, ball, flag, and these 100-inchers. Well, actually, the hardest one we've ever fought was one of those 87. It was an 87-inch, but it was like built look like when you saw its head, the ones with the big head. There's something behind that's morphometrics, like their body shapes, but there's ones that you pull the head up first and you're like, oh, this is like going to be 110-incher, and it's like 88, and you're like, it's all head, it's like a giant head, it's like big shoulders, and so it's like we fought one out in same place near Mayo Swell where it was just ruthless, the fight. But those 100+ inch fish don't come in.
Well, especially the time of year that you're dealing with them too.
They have, and our buyer swears to God, and he's pretty good at it. So it's like I believe him that he can look at their meat and tell that they have like a different metabolism basically at that when they first. So you think about it, they go even if a little 500 miles, or they go out and they waste all their energy spawning. It's like not waste, but they spend all their energy. Like they eat, and it's a lot of energy to go spawn. So they come back, it makes sense they would have like another gear that they can go into, and that gear is nuts. Like, where you can like, we have a gun. So it's like, we have, instead of dragging them, it's like if you shoot, there's a spot on their head that if you put a bullet right into it straight on, it's like, but you miss it even by like half an inch.
It's like that spike that we've used.
They have basically a light sensor. It's one of the many cool things about tuna that doesn't impact like policy, which is our goal. But that would be really cool to study is if you look at them, tuna have like a little off color spot right above between their eyes. And I think it's a light sense. It's how they know where they are on the earth. They can sense like the light and the depth. And it's like they're, I would assume, hardwired to their brain. So it's like, we will shoot one, but we've had fish that you could shoot 5 times right there and it just doesn't want to go. It's like, it's a different animal, but it's fighting to the death basically. And it's scary as hell when it happens. It's so that, when you get one of those on a rod and you don't know what you're doing, it's like, by the time you get it to the boat with generally smaller rods, I mean, the people more
even if you do know what you're doing,
you kind of want to just get rid of it.
Yeah,
done.
Yeah.
You're releasing it. Sometimes they just suck so bad, you kind of like just done with it.
Yeah, sometimes you don't have a choice of doing the proper method or not. But those ones that go away when it's a frenzy at the boat.
Well, if it's that mad, it's
that's what I mean.
Fine.
Yeah,
it's like,
perfect.
If you see those ones come in that are like docile looking, but they're over 100 inches, it's like that thing is cooked. And
our rule of thumb is generally if the end of the fight is a true pinwheel,
right,
they need to be swam and released properly.
Yeah,
swam
you're
20, 30, 40 minutes, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
But if it's like a black back shot, when you get them on the leader super quick and then they're submissive on the leader, but they stayed black back the whole time.
Yep.
They're ready to go.
We'll just pop them off like a sailfish.
Yeah. It's like they have another, it's like, and some of them might be smart enough to come in, it's like tuna do weird things, but it's like, like we've had fish that swim the big ones when you put them out on a flag. I mean, we use a lot of rope. I won't say exactly, but we probably use more than most because my dad has stories of everything going, back in the day when they started at Boone Island, which is like 6 miles.
I feel like we add more line to our baskets every year.
Yeah, it's like they started in the 70s. Like my dad, like my grandfather did it, but like they would go out to Boone Island, which if you're from Southern Maine, it's only like 6 miles off land. And they remember the day they got to Jeffries, like, oh my goodness, like we went to Jeffries. And where we live, it's 20 miles out. So, I mean, they didn't have radios. They have stories that are, but they've seen everything. And so like eventually they got over the back and it's 800,000 feet and big fish. And, he burned into his brain how many he lost because a lot of guys still use the short. Some people have so much faith in their shocker that they will use short ones still. But like, we're not like that at all. We have like much more rope. We can cover anywhere in New England.
I've seen the bow of your boat. Yeah. It's like 4 baskets.
Yeah, we have a lot of rope, and we also use full flags, radar reflectors. There was actually one time we were down east, and like we're one of the only boats that goes down there, and it's like it's just as many fish there as anywhere else, and it's like there's 100 miles of Maine coast that no one fishes, and it's just so big that it's it's with the weather in the southwest weather regime too. It's like that Bermuda high. It's always windier down east, so it's like it's almost always foggy. It's because it's cold, but when it works out, it's like amazing down there. And we had one day where it was like it was so choppy that you had to steam to really go anywhere. It was like so, and then we you slow the boat down and there's just 50 swimming by you, and it's like, oh, here we go. It's like it's gonna be a lot of fish, and you're the only ones within 150 miles. Sick. So it's like, but it was so choppy, and this was probably like 2016, 2015. And it's like harpooning, it's like I'm 42 now, and it's like I'm just starting to like hit one that I used to watch my dad hit and be like, how do you hit that? Because like classical harpooning, it's like, I know there's all kinds of stuff going on with bait nowadays, but like, when you're chasing them from behind, the size, the depth, the refraction, it's like, even the easiest, like we have a high stand because like my dad doesn't want to dip the stand. He had one that was the last. So it's kind of a disadvantage on easy ones because like there's still a lot, that extra foot or two that when you're cocked, you're like 10 feet up. It's like, but you can also throw out much further. So it's like, I like that better, but it's like I missed one down east also, it was like a wake over here, a wake over there. And then like a wake in front of us, and like they were turning, and it was like they clearly had come out from inside and popped up and started doing a circle. And so you see, and they're all like 1,000, huge fish. And there was like, you see a wake like, on all sides of you, so you know something going on. And then they just came up in front of us, and they just kept coming up and up and up. And by the time we went over them, the thing paralyzed me, because like they just were out of the water, and it was like I didn't expect that. And so one of the worst things you can do harpooning is way too long, because like you're going 8 knots, or this year we were going 10 knots because they were flying, but you're going, so like if you don't throw at the right time, there's like a point where if you throw at them, your boat will push the harpoon in front of them, so you miss them in front of their nose. It's like my dad still to this day will like want to kill me if I throw one over the front of them, because it means you waited too long. And it's like, and so I hit one, I threw it this one, and there's 5 of them under my feet, and the harpoon like hit the fish and like just stopped, like laid on it, like literally, like I hit
That's
it
how
like
far back his back.
yeah, so I like it went over its nose, but then like the back end hit the fish, and then leveled up, and then it still didn't take off for like another split second. So it's like the thing, they had no idea we were there. But it's a lot of fish, but so it's even there's no such thing in my opinion as an easy one, because again, it's like not only is it still a small thing you're throwing at, relatively moving fast, but it's also if they get deeper, it gets harder and harder and harder. And this day they were all like those fat 90-inch, they were like, every one of them was a good one. It was like some batch of fish that came in from somewhere. I think there's different intelligence levels in tuna, and it's like there are ones that know how to find herring, and the fat herring, and like this was the batch that every single fish we got was like they were just everywhere, but they were the chop and the calm, everything and lined up, that it was like we were missing, like I'd probably hit a couple more now, but it was like my brother just missed the first one of the day and got pissed. And so, and then my dad made a comment, and like, it's a family affair. We fight all the time.
Well, that never happens.
Yeah. It's like that's why when they try to get us to go on Wicked Tuna, and they don't know what they miss when we told them no. But it's like, it's my brother, like, it was like a bunch came in. It's like the second bunch of the day, and they turned at us. It's called, head on. And it's really hard to hit one head on. But when you have 4-foot chops and it's calm and it's gray, it's like really hard. And it's like, but he was the only one that could hit one that day. I hit one, but it was like, I'll be honest with you, I just threw the pole into a bunch of them, like, and I hit one. And that fish actually then spent the next 6 hours swimming around and not moving. It was float. So what they do is kind of where we started this. It's like those big ones can learn how to keep the slack off the line. So you actually have to fight them to keep them fighting, or else they'll just swim around in circles.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it's crazy. This was like, not most of them don't do that though. It's like these ones were all, it was like a 99-incher, really fat. It's like they were really hard to catch. But then the fog rolled in. Like my brother was like, so I was looking in the binos, like I use, I can spawn pretty far away, and it's like everywhere you looked was a bunch, like everywhere. Like it was like the most fish I've ever seen in my life. And then my brother was like, what's that? And we had 3 flags out because every one of them was so hard to hit. We hit them in weird places, deep. So like the shocker wasn't working. And all of a sudden the fog rolled in, and it was like, oh geez. And like, somehow we found 2 of them, and then another boat that was out there late found the other one and sat there. But you couldn't see like me to you.
That's crazy.
Down east, the fog's thick. But it was, what was crazy though.
You say down east, just coast-wise in Maine.
So like most people think of Maine as like all down east, but like if you're like going like by the conservative like Maine, or down east is kind of east of Acadia. So like, from Winter Harbor, which is Acadia wraps around to Winter Harbor and Schoodic Peninsula, but it's like the hardcore would even call Jonesport like the beginning of down east. But to me, down east is basically, I want to say like I would normally say like the feel of it Stonington, but it's like, when I say down east, we're talking east of Acadia. So
Gotcha.
Like about 150 miles from here probably to the east. And it's just like really there's everywhere along the Maine coast is good fishing. It's like, and it's so big and hard to fish. I'm not afraid to say that, but it's like that for that same reason, it's hard for us to fish too, because it's like, but Acadia, way down east, like, a lot of times when we go out, we go southeast out of there. So we're fishing like we've had fish hit the Canadian line and we have to turn around. It's
That's crazy.
yeah. And so there's a lot of fish, and it's like, but it's those ones, just to kind of, those ones that are big are, so, but what if like by doing this all we instill like better handling, so like, which would be better for us, better for, our, it's like ethos. So like by doing the science, we're also going to be hopefully showing fishermen the right way to do it. And you guys do a lot of that with your videos. I mean, it's like in when you talk, it's like you obviously stress this, but if you're going to do like a study like mark or capture, but if you get the released ones, you do the fin clips or the other tools on land, you release them right, and it's like it's approved. You could build an index, which is like really important because right now we're doing nothing. And so, I mean, I don't think I need to tell you guys, there's a lot of tuna out there right now.
Too many tunas.
It's
Great for charters.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to say it because like, so the Bluefin Collaborative, it's like, and for your listeners, it's like who many probably know me just from, we've battled over herring, we've been involved in mackerel. It's like we've fought for the U.S.
I think there's a lot of listeners though that are, a couple years into this fish.
Yeah, so I probably have no idea. So it's like, like our family, like my dad was one of the people that started East Coast Tuna, which was basically when in the 80s when things got tough. It went from like a non-fishery, like my dad, they were doing it in the 60s and 70s, but my dad has stories where in Plymouth actually, where they had to pay the guy to get rid of his fish because they didn't, like they literally had so many.
Crazy.
So it wasn't like, and it sounds horrible, but there was so many tuna, like they weren't doing anything to bother anyone because there's nobody doing it. And then the 80s came along and they became more valuable. And it's like, and then it became a huge source of money for, I don't know, it's like the environment. If you were to look up.
And that's when the politics get involved.
When the environmental campaigns latched onto this, for better or worse, it's like there was a lot of money in there's a huge industry in the environmental world for bluefin and always has been. And so you needed an association. And so it was actually, so Leonard and as I'm told, it was, we didn't have as a fishery money, we weren't alive, but our industry, like the people back then, we didn't have the money to hire somebody. So it actually was the seine fleet. So the purse seiners had a pretty good, until they stopped catching them, they made a lot of money in it. And they also had scallop boats, but I don't even know if scallops were big then. But that they helped fund East Coast Tuna, which was Rich Rouet was the one that was the executive director, who did 20, 30 years of just like really hard work to keep the industry going. And it led to eventual CITES. You know how it is. It was like these crazy, like, being told you're not gonna be able to ship to Japan or an endangered species. It's like, so we've always been involved. And then ABTA, we helped start that. And it's like, we just, moved away from that. It's just difference in opinions. And, we aren't involved in that anymore. But I've been going to the meetings my whole life. But, it's like, I just can't stand, like it's probably from growing up, whether it's nature, nurture, I never know. It's like, was it being around my dad and listening and getting used to going to meetings, or are we just both like loony and just can't stand?
I think you're both just part tuna.
Yeah,
you guys care.
Like at the end of the day, you're passionate.
Yeah, it's like, and with harpooning, because we have weird weather and short seasons relatively, it's like we have a lot of energy left over when so I can't stand the idea of all these meetings going on and us not being there. But it's like the advocacy part of it's easy. It's like now the winning the battles, like, they still told us until there was a literal collapse of the herring stock and they went on disaster relief. Because like I actually even went and helped the purse seiners, the herring purse seiners, because they were doing it the right way and the paratrawlers did all the damage. But it got to the point where the collapse happened and, they still wouldn't admit that there was no herring. And so it's like, it's hard to fight the advocacy stuff. So it's like, but it's easier at the same time because it's just so much simpler. It's like you can go like, I want this, Science is the total opposite. It's like everything takes forever. It's really complicated. It's the hardest thing you can do. It's like to start a nonprofit and, you can't go to people and say like, you're going to make, like you start up stew where you're like, you're going to get 50%, you'll get some huge return here. It's like, your return in this is of being able to continue to fish for these. Right. Things. And so it's like a healthy industry, healthy resource. And so it's like, and it all comes back to having the right scientists, because we're not scientists. Like, and I'm not afraid to like be at science meetings and speak, but it's like scientists are the key, because, at the end of the day, everything you're doing has to go through the assessment, which is essentially math. And it's like, we're not at that level, but what we can do, the things we can do is like, sample, innovate, and then bring in funding and scientific expertise that's coming from outside. So like the political ICAT world, because like ICAT's really, it's like, it's just like its own thing. And it's like anyone involved in it, it's even if they feel a certain way, it's like there's this pressure to like almost conform to what's been going on because you have 30 years of saying it's been this way. And oh, there's no line in the middle. And it's like, oh, there's this spawning area called the Slope C that they're spawning in. So it's like hard to really shift, which one of the things we can do is, we're not going to back, it's like we are doing this. It's
fresh
like,
blood.
And it's like bringing in fresh blood, but it opens the door to, I think, the people that had felt pressure to kind of toe the line, that they can now feel a little freer. And there's still going to be people, but like the goal is like objective, highest level, but having industry do, our sampling and kind of add the momentum. And then when something gets proven, it's like we can also publicize that. And it's like, at the end, the truth is whatever the truth is, it's like it's going to be shown by the science. But like, let's be honest, right now, if you had science that was accurate, we have more fish than at any point in recent history. It's absolutely. So it's like to get into like the part people want to probably really, it's like what's going on out there right now is incredible. Like we had this year brown water. I don't know if you guys had it too.
It was bad.
It was bad. There's actually on the 18th, like we went to, like it was so bad. We talked to John Hare at the Northeast Center. He's the head of Woods Hole, NOAA Woods Hole. And we're like, John, I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's like something really wrong right now. And apparently it started in April and then went all winter. And it's like this, it's analogy. It's like, to me, it's like more complicated than algae, phytoplankton. But it's an organism essentially that's at the heart of it that no one wants to eat. It's like not poisonous like red tide, but it's like, it's like a brace. If you look at it under the microscope, it's like no. It's like normally you'd think, oh, this is good. It's like the source of herring food, but it's like this one no one wants. And my theory is there's a seminar next week. It's gotten to the point it was so bad that UNH and all these other institutions are holding like seminar or workshops focused on, because if you look at the chlorophyll charts, like which nobody should look at because they're useless. But you can see the color of the water, and it's like normally there's patterns, and like you have certain, obviously we look for, everyone knows probably everything. It's like you look, tuna like to swim in clear water. So it's like, it's like, it doesn't mean if there's clear water, there's going to be tuna, but it's like, it's
your best opportunity.
It's like, but there's certain patterns that almost in my time of looking at satellite data always happen. Like you get out to like the middle of Murray's and it's clear. It's like, no matter what. And it's like, gotten so bad that like from when you leave the port, you're mooring literally in Perkins Cove to everywhere you go. Well, some days we're putting on 150, 160 miles at like 8 knots, 10 knots, never slowing down and running through brown water the whole time. Well, fish don't want to run in that. Running fish is when they're swimming. It's like we say they're running. And so even with that going on, if you sat on like pieces of bottom right on the edge, and you just sat there, like there was just conveyor belts of fish coming out of places. Like I'm sure it was happening on Stellwagen. I know it was happening off Maine, and it was like there's just so many of them that there was some fish showing. And like we caught, I think we would have caught the whole harpoon category in 2 weeks in June in Maine. But then the fog rolled in. It's like. I
think the brown water was definitely a hindrance overall. When did it disappear? Mid-August ish.
Yeah, the fishing for us was pretty good. It was really hard to land them.
Yeah.
We were harpooning fish and they were like 2 feet underwater. You could barely see them.
We had swivel in the reel almost every fish through mid-August. But I also think it you're saying no, bait fish species or whatever wanted to eat it.
Well, it's like there wasn't enough of that.
But what was your herring like up there? Because our herring was really, really good for the last few years. Then we got this nasty water this year. And
we had it till July.
Yeah, but not...
It wasn't like ridiculous though.
Yeah.
We had...
It was good.
It's like we had a lot of... So it's like we don't... I wish we did more of like sampling. Like we're like always moving, like no fun. Like you never get to like jig or anything. It's like...
It is fun.
No, it's like...
Sitting up in the tower
No, I mean like... But like if we're like looking, if you think we're around them, it's like on our boat, it's like... We're not like allowed to go like, hey, let's drop a sabiki and see what it is. It's like, just shut up and look for fish. Yeah. And it's like, so it's like, we don't really sample. There's a lot of stuff under us. I can't say what it is, but it looked to me like there's a lot of something. The midwater trawlers didn't only hammer herring. They hammered mackerel, they hammered little pollock, they hammered
Whiting.
squid, whiting.
Yeah.
So it's like in butterfish, river, it's like they hammered everything. It's like I tell stories the whole night about, so when I worked with the herring seiners, like I learned everything that happened in the midwater trawler fishery. And it's like, we're not going to go there today, but like the damage was done to haddock, to everything you can imagine, on everything. So it's like, I don't know whether everything we're seeing is herring because we don't stop, but there was definitely something more positive. There was like that hook fishery off like inshore, what I would call mid-coast Maine. So like just mid-coast Maine to me is like Portland, roughly Portland to like Stonington.
Gotcha.
Even though a lot of people would call Stonington, like when you go to Stonington, even though it's gentrified, or not gentrified, but it's the COVID reaction, people have moved everywhere in Maine. So it's like the whole coast is filling up, but it's like, you feel like you're middle of nowhere when you're in Stonington. It's like way out of peninsula. But, the mid-coast area always has a lot of tuna. And, they pour out of there, 'cause tuna are generally like going in. Not all of them do this.
Chasing pogies, chasing herring, mackerel.
They'll go in, like to where like, let's say people are fishing, everyone knows about it, like Seguin, which is just like, an island off of like Popham Beach. And, it's just herring bottom. So it's like, and there's a lot of pogies there too, but there was more herring in the fish. We actually went like 5 years without seeing a herring in a fish. It was like just pogies, squid. And we actually started seeing herring finally again this year in their stomachs. So, the tuna will generally go way up inside. It turns out tuna eat way closer to shore than I ever would have imagined. It's like, and my dad's always been saying like he says things that like I learned not to ignore. Like the big
you ignored him at one point, but now you're like,
now I'm like,
he was on to something.
He's actually a genius.
Well, it's like, because like the classic thinking is like the tuna will go in, and like in our area, they'll either go south. There's like, this because when you chase them and spook them, they go the direction they want to go. So like they'll often shoot out to the south, southeast, east. Like they did a study, Billy Chapralis, who, rest in peace. He's a really good fisherman out of, Outer Cape that passed away from a heart attack a few years ago. But one of the leaders back in the day, like one of the reasons we're still here, but they did a study with Molly where they did acoustic radio. So like you hit one with an acoustic transmitter and then chase it.
We've done that.
Yeah.
When they hit it, it was on like the southwest corner, and he harpooned it with the transmitter, and the fish literally just turned towards Franklin and just gave it to her, and to the point where they had to turn around, like they couldn't keep up. So it's like, when they get spooked, they go, but that's their general pattern. It feels like they'll come in, eat, go, come in, eat, go. But what my dad says is the big ones don't seem to always do that. They probably have learned to save their energy, and they'll just swim north 5 miles or south 5 miles. But they won't.
That's why most of our fish in the bay are, at least recently, but historically, big ones.
Yeah. It's like
they get in there. They get a bait source pattern on a specific tide change.
Yeah.
And they'll wander from it, but they know it's gonna be there at a certain time.
It's crazy too, because like, it's like he always would say like, I don't think the big ones do the same thing, and it's true, because you go out in the middle of nowhere where we go, and you don't usually see, like, they could be there and hiding. Big ones, like when they get in a bunch of like 50 or 800, like we've seen it all. It's like 1,000, but you don't usually see bunches of more than like 5 or 100. Yeah. But really, you don't see a lot of bunches out in the really deep basins of just really, really big ones. And when you do, they just make a mockery of you. It's like only when it's calm, they'll come up over there, and then you'll go over there and you see them all slosh, like to the point where I once was looking at the binoculars at a bunch like 2 miles, 3 miles away, like really far. We can find them far away. And it was an area I think we'd already chased a bunch. And we've got like a 692 Detroit. It's like we've rebuilt 3 times. It's like you can hear us 50 miles away. So it's like, but they were like, I was watching them and I was like, Dad, just rev it, like go. And it's like the second he revved it from 3 miles away, they all
no way.
Yeah, I'm not even joking.
That's
not
insane.
Even joking. And it's like, I swear to God, they knew our boat. And it's like, so they screw with you, but you really don't see a lot of the big bunches offshore. So it would make sense, because like I think what's going on when you're out in the middle of nowhere, it's like, if you could, like, there's days we come home, like let's say we're in Murray's, which we call Murray's, like it's really southern Wilkinson. It's like Murray's like kind of has taken the name, but it's, east, northeast of Wildcat, all that deep water.
Yeah.
It's like when we go to the south, we start calling it Murray's, and people from Cape Cod call it out east. It's like, it's that deep water out.
Yeah.
There's days where we're coming home, like, and we'll basically go over Pigeon Hill, like that's the trajectory, and we have to stop every 5 seconds because a bunch is swimming by us. Like, so they're just pouring out there, and So like kind of the thinking is maybe what goes on with their movements is, the average fish comes in, eats, and then heads out. And then at the end of the day, it always seems the bunches are bigger. And they might spend a day or two and then go back in somewhere else or go to the same place. But it's like if you think back on it, it's like the big ones, like you don't see as nearly as many big ones out there. So it's like it wouldn't be crazy that they don't leave. And it's like they do stay. And it makes sense if they're big and smart that they would stay closer to the food. And you guys know it's like the amount of big fish near shore right now. Big fish. It's like
insane.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
2-3 miles, like everywhere.
Like when we were in Nova Scotia, and it's like we went, like it was nuts. It's like I was talking to you.
How insane! Like, let's take a step. Let's
I just would tell you, like, if I could move to Nova Scotia tomorrow, I would. It like.
What was like? How did you feel when you first?
Well, I still
first visual of them.
I haven't stopped thinking about it literally since. And and it's like people always want to obviously like the way that they harvest them there, it's just like, there's individual quotas. They've got like 50 by 30s. They have tanks of a boat, but they're like the way the guys I went with, which is the Chicard family, which is they're Acadians, which like, is French speaking. It's like deep historic. It's like that's Wedgeport and those areas are all French speaking Acadians. And it's like, they're the ones that were persecuted out. And that's like the Cajuns, like same lineage. And then everyone realized that the Acadians were really good at everything. And they're like, all right, you can come back. We need you. So like, there's a lot of historic, if they take it seriously. But really all of the maritime, I think it's fishing world. It's like everyone, that's what they got. And they do it right. So it's crazy when you just get there and everyone's really laid back. And like, it just, they could go out, but it's like you go out and it was like, and granted they've learned this stuff over time, as you guys fish with really good fishermen and in the Maritimes, and but like really didn't know what to expect. But when you I've never seen feeding fish. Like I've seen millions of fish in a day, but like when they're in that mode, they like don't want to be near you. It's like 2.5 gear. It's like when they're eating, they're a different animal. Especially when they're frenzied, it turns out. Yeah. They're a different. So it's like really like weird when we went there. It's like I've seen the videos, like your videos, like our, and it's, but like you just, and their boats go 7 like knots, and everyone's just like hanging out. It's like no big deal. And, they wait till September. They were waiting until late September because of the general category. Our fishery.
They play our fishery.
Like they're smart enough to.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So they wait and then so they have their own quota, but some guys will catch that quota in June and just say screw it, I'm going back to halibut, or taking a break before lobster, because obviously lobsters so
or they're herring fishing
yeah. And so we actually timed it up like so they have because they've managed it right, they have a herring roe fishery, which so it's like they sample, and then when the herring are fully ripe and running, just about to spawn, they let it's an open access drift gill net. So we were right next to that fleet. So it's like, the tuna, obviously it was like you had in the herring when they get fresh herring. I just haven't seen enough herring, like fat, ripe and running herring.
They're fucking
enormous. And they're like a work of art. It's
they are.
They're pink and silver.
Their
and like,
belly,
just want to eat it. Like,
it's like a rainbow trout belly.
Yeah.
They're so fat, but the skin layer around their bellies, it's getting so stretched that it like thins
They look,
out.
and it's just like, compared to the one that's like a really still well-treated frozen herring that's been thawed out, it's like not even the same thing.
Yeah.
And so the tuna are like, there's obviously a connection between what's going on, but this still happens. Like they went in July in a different place. It happened. There was a boat that was all over Instagram that went in June and it happened. So I don't think this was just a herring spawning event. This is just how many fish were there. And you go out around the corner, like our hotel, I could see, because there's one day I couldn't go, and I had to go drive around and go see Halifax, because like you look out and the boat's just 1 mile off land, literally. And you go around the corner and they're big time lobstermen up there, and they have a big time herring fishery. So it's like they have, the father is really long time smart business guy, buys lobsters, sells lobster, just good fisherman, hard worker, has access to herring. So they have access to things that like, the amount of herring they go through, it's like in the US would cost you like, it's unreal. You wouldn't be able to
be in the thousands and thousands.
Oh, it's like I was one of the guys I know from down east, like Sorrento, it's like he runs the co-op. He catches like 1 million pounds of lobsters even he was saying it was like $1 a pound I mean, it was like the numbers, like because of our herring fish, you can't get it. So they have great access to herring. Not only that, and they know all the guys that are doing the drift net, so they can get a box of that too. So it's like, but they have fresh herring, but they know what they're doing. So this isn't like just shit luck, but just go out, wait till you mark one, slow the boat right down, start throwing herring. And then when I was there, what was going on is they would sit down around 10, 12, so all of a sudden the whole, and I have pictures of it, it's like the whole machine just fish, down at 10 fathoms. And then, when I was there over time, they would get up 5, 6 fathoms. And then and then everyone starts bringing the shit out to the front of the boat. And it's like, oh my God, here we go. And you just start throwing in front of the boat and they just start jumping under the stand. And they just sit there and wait. And it was so refreshing because even though they have ITQs, it's like they could have caught 3 times their individual quota in each day I was there. They have a short line with a cable, with a button, a 1 foot stand basically. And tuna don't seem to care when you get one. They'll just keep going. And so, you just keep throwing the bait and you could just re-rig, but they would limit themselves to 1 or 2. And there was it was really stressful because there's mostly big ones, and they're trying to, because they have a quota, they're trying to get the small fat ones. Just small fat ones are obviously good in general,
better
but
same money.
but it's they're also trying to get more fish per weight, so it's and then that helps over time. The more.
What was your goal size? What did they want?
They wanted the happiest they were was under 90 inches, so they don't even see
that's interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't think it was gonna be that low.
It's the 2 best looking ones that I was there for them harvesting 9. So there's 2 boats. Joel runs one, Camille, and then Eric goes with Joel. It's like the 2 family lobster, just 10. I don't know if you guys have seen them.
Insane.
50 by 30, but the rails are 20 feet high. It's they're the most amazing fishing platforms ever. You've got picnic tables and you can just hang out and it's awesome. But it's a great platform because you can just sit there and the boat doesn't rock. It doesn't, and so you just drift down and it's their goal though was really 1 or 2, and if you get 2 good ones, get a 3rd one. And then when I was there, they have different quota periods, but the goal was to get the smallest ones you could get. And when I was there, the smallest ones were 85. They don't get they go way out big eye fishing and harpooning out in the hellhole in the middle of nowhere.
Swordfish harpooning.
And they'll see 30 inches and stuff out there, but along the shore, they have I think a 60-inch limit, but they don't even they've never had to worry about that. So it's I've fished up there, I don't even know, 10 plus years. Yeah,
I can count on one hand the amount of days of seeing a visual of airing out tunas that were in that 60-inch range.
Yeah,
they're 500 plus.
Yeah,
almost all of them.
And really, the hardest part was, the hardest part is that the smallest ones aren't always the best ones, and those ones we were talking about earlier, the barrel-looking ones. Some of the fattest looking ones I've ever caught, were not fat at all. They just had a barrel. And so it's the 85 inches, I don't even think there was 98, 99 inches that you look at them and they're just the perfect specimen fat ones. I think the best one that was caught was probably 99, 98 inches. But it's it's what you learn watching it is that, and even if you go through the videos, which I have, so it's
you got some really good footage.
Really, one of the days we went out there, it was we threw maybe 10 single herring, and for the next 4 hours we were surrounded. I have hours of footage, and it was every size. I think that was a mother load had arrived, and it was unbelievable. I honestly I can't stop thinking about it because it's it was so cool. And normally it's you think about catching them, and it's but it's really we all love tuna too. It's
right.
I'm not trying to sound hippie. It's but we all love the fish we're trying to catch. It's this is part of our blood, but it was just unbelievable because you're 2 miles off a random place, and this is going on in PEI.
Yep.
This is going on probably to the west because
the west side of Nova Scotia.
And
Chatham.
and
Rhode Island,
and really all the way to New Jersey. It turns out because they showed up in May and didn't leave.
Same behavior.
And but it was eventually if you watch the cycles, the big ones. There was big ones that were I would call residents that probably just lived there and look kind of older and banged up.
Junkyard dog.
Yeah, they even had ones that they would catch. So the gill nets so the herring are so tight to bottom that not only would they get ones that had, like the tuna would go so berserk that they just rip the gill nets to shreds and come in with like literally like they get one once in a while with gill net marks on it. But the crazier part was that the tuna sometimes a lot of them had
The throat
scars, like
red throat rash
from running on but I had never really thought about it. But it's like they got some ones that were so fresh because it was just that spawn. So imagine
they're just burying themselves
imagine
in
100, yeah, like imagine 150 by 30, which they're almost all the boats in the herring fleet up there. It's like we would be going in at like, so we would go out at noon and come back at like 5. Like it was like you could have gone out at 8 a.m. and stayed like you could have done it under the lights. It's like they were there all the time. And there's crazy things even happening too, like the fish follow one boat versus the other. It's like, so you trade them off. Like it was behaviors I never thought tuna would do. Like there was one point where we had to go in and we had them chummed up all day and we had to sit next to the other boat, and it happened both ways. It's like they were attracted to that boat, and they told me one day when they went home at the end of the year, they followed them for like 40 miles. And that's the video I have where I'm just like throwing it over, going ahead. They just followed us right to the harbor.
Isn't there a video of a guy going like all the way into the marina in a dinghy?
Yeah.
With like an 1,100 pounder?
That's
Where is that?
Newfoundland.
It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Nuts.
It's like
all the way into the
that's
dock to like the slip, and he's just going like this, and there's this 1,000 pounder just milling around.
That is the biggest tuna. I'm glad you brought that up because I've watched that video many times. I think that's the biggest tuna I've ever seen.
You know when you see that neck size class that the tail is just like dark black
Huge.
and
It's
like
a whole nother
wide, and you see that and you're
Wide
like,
this
he's over
way.
800.
Like looking
you know?
at its back, wide that.
Right. You're like, you know that fish is over 800. This thing was way over that. Its
Well
sickles
over
were like
1,000.
almost 3 feet long.
Yeah.
It was insane.
It's crazy. And it's like, you know, and what's weird about it is like, if you're just sitting there, it's like, boy, it's a fishy place where they were, but it's like, you look at the chart and you know that it's happening in Canso, it's happening all the way around in PI, and it's happening when they go, the halibut fleet offshore, like 30, 40 miles, had them all around the boat back off of Yarmouth. And it's like, it's happening, I can tell you, the whole coast of Maine. It's like not this, like something, I think what's going on differently up there is, my own opinion is that, you know, it's there's so many tuna everywhere, but there's less boats.
There's no recreational pressure.
There's no pressure on them. So it's like we were sitting, it was just 2 of us. And there's a guy up there that's like the hardest going guy I've ever seen who runs. So the only other thing they have there is great whites, which is crazy. So they have not a lot of seals, not a lot of anything, but there's great, like to the point where like there was a pond at our hotel, like a freshwater pond, completely cut off from the ocean. And like one of the guys on the boat, that was like, who's like not afraid of anything, was like, I wouldn't even swim in that pond. Like literally, it's like, you guys are idiots. Like that's how, like they went out to tag. I think it was like O-Search or somebody, like they like went out one day and found great whites. And so they're just lurking around, and there's a guy that goes on great white tours right in the same spot. But it's like, it's really like you're in a spot that looks no different than anywhere else. There's, you know, that whole coastline. It's, you know, and you just start chumming, and it's like, but the lack of pressure, it's like, you know, the things going on with like behind draggers and scallopers. I mean, there's things that off the Cape is so dynamic that it's like it's hard to know what's going on. But to have this happening like in a mile offshore, like it's like, it just speaks to, I think, how many tuna are out there right now too, but that lack of pressure allows them, you know, even just like sailboats and like tankers and tugboats. It's like you go in the Gulf of Maine at any point, there's boats everywhere, and
Windmills.
Yeah, I don't even get. So
That's a whole nother day of podcast.
I'm not afraid to admit that's no, like we've been fighting that hard. It's like, with science, it's like, which is another place we're lacking science, is they don't know where we fish. So, but yeah, you know, we don't want those. And you know, they're not, which is like, you know, I think we've actually done a lot of work, we being the industry. I mean, the lobster industry on your side is always a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, the main lobster industry.
But we don't want windmills.
No, not at all. And nowhere. I mean, I say it at every meeting, and I won't go into it, but I start every meeting by saying, like, I just want to like say, and they all know me at Boehm, which is like the NOAA. I start every meeting by saying, like, I don't think they should be anywhere, but it's like, I know that it's like, if no one's like saying anything, then like someone has to be here, and we have to like theoretically talk about, if you're going to have them, what do you do? And so it's like, you just push them far enough offshore that they're already not going to work economically, but it's like, you know, it's like do the same thing they would do to us, like delay, push them out, And, if you shouldn't, I just say, I can't believe you come to a meeting and say that you start by saying, let's displace people, as opposed to finding somewhere where there is nobody. It's like, and I don't think they should be anywhere, but we don't want windmills, but it's like the science helps there too. Cause we don't have any proof of where we're fishing, but
to circle back on the boat pressure.
Yeah.
Anything, the less pressure up there is what creates that.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think
There's no doubt.
like
We
using
see
Stowagon, to your point, like the windmill, obviously serious, but interjected as a joke.
Yep.
The shipping lanes over the bank, like the sailboats,
and everyone talks about the outflow
the
pipe.
whale watch boats, it's just
even just but even residential pressure,
Yeah.
like where I live, everyone sprays for mosquitoes,
Yeah.
and everyone sprays for ticks, and then the tide comes in and covers up. So it's like you have things like residential, sewage, like last year, so it's like it's not just even
the runoff.
Runoff. It's like all kinds of ththings that affect it, and like you go to Nova Scotia and there's not even a light on shore at night. So it's like it's very different, and it's like it left an impression that I'll never we've already booked for it's like I've already have a hotel, and it's like I would
done.
It changes your life.
What was cool about it though, it's like what was really refreshing. It's like, here's some of the hardest going people. Like, we're hard goer. It's like we're all in this room are hard goer. It's like you guys hard goer. I mean, start in April haddock, and then just finished recently. You're nuts. It's like you go and you're doing charges, which I couldn't handle because it's so much. You're worrying about customers too, and it's like so you got double the load and you're going early. We're hard goers, but what was crazy up there is they're just hard goers, but it's like it was laid back, and it kind of came back to yes, ITQs, individual quotas helps, but really it wasn't that, because you could have that type of fishing here where you focus on getting, especially harpooning, and it's becoming a thing here because there are so many tuna. It's like we're not going to get into this hot button issue of fishing around scallopers and all that, but it's like even if you were doing that and it's like your goal was to get one or two a day and get the right ones, pace it out, it was kind of nice to see the hard going nature, but laid back it was almost like a laid back but really hard goers. And they're also obviously the nicest people,
just a completely different
do anything
way
to
of
help
life.
you. It's but they really take it seriously up there, and they really, really take it seriously to get that right. Now rod and reeling, it's you could technically release ones until you get the one, but that's it's more of a harpooning thing where you can stand over them, and it was just something I'd never even thought of, and it's
well, I mean, I think a lot of that too is it's better quality,
right.
All that aside, but then to your point about high grading, you can't do that up there.
No.
So the harpooning allows them to do that.
Right. Yeah, I know. And
Right,
it was
Nicely.
Yeah,
in the
and to
best,
be honest with
most
you,
humane way possible.
Imagine being, you've been there. It's how it is up there. It's they have a quota. They can catch as many as they want. It's and I was just let's just keep getting them. Let's do this. And it's no, we're going to. And it's by the end of it, I was I get it, because part of it is that, we are lucky in the U.S., especially New England, to have access to Logan and to have trucking everywhere, because when you see the logistics, they do their own fish, everything that the dealer would do,
Yep.
to the, it's ready to go. They box it, they ice it.
My last 2 years up there, it was all processed flatbed trailer on Jamie or Ben's truck. Yep. Next morning, driving to Halifax, meeting their buyer, basically signing the paperwork, everything soup to nuts themselves.
And and
then going on a charter
right.
as soon as they get back,
or
commercial fishing again on their way back.
And it's that they have that, and it's they could get, it's they have the patience, but it's their living, and it's and they have the and I'm starting to preach. It's we should, I think, all if we can all do that a little more. It's on the fishing side of it, it's developing markets is important. You can't, I'm not saying everyone just go out and get the fat, small one. It's not that easy, but it was kind of more the focus on quality. And it's and I like open access. I'm not I'll fight, to the death fight ITQs. Here, it's I respect completely up in Canada. It's even though it's what they've done, and it's I'm not, and totally different it's not apples to apples. In our fishery, it's I like the competition. I like the open access. So it's I think you need that, and that's going to always drive some level of a race, quote unquote, to fish. And it's actually even harder in the general because there's really nothing they can do because there's so many people. But in harpooning, I'd love to see it where people focus more on getting less good ones and like not trying to get 10 big ones and be cool on TikTok. It's like, but it's hard to do it if like, so that's why it's like eventually
it's hard to do it with the weather, the distances that you're traveling.
Yeah.
You gotta make the
It's
most of your
impossible.
opportunity.
And it's like easy to say that now, but it's like, unless the government were to like force, I think the way you deal with it, there's a lot of issues going on, but it's like the one, and I'm not getting into domestic stuff. It's like TBC has nothing to do with it, but it's like, if like you just had a smaller bag limit, it's like it would as long as there's no high grading, it would force people to think twice before they throw, because we do have the opportunity. But like, it's easy to say that like we should do that, but it's like, it's not going to happen unless the government, but I think Canada was like, I don't know whether a little bit too is it wasn't my boat. It wasn't like my family. It wasn't like I didn't have to stress about everything quite as much, but it was the same intensity level. But like it really like showed like what you could do is just sit there and watch tuna swimming around. Like, so basically what would happen is we get our 1, 2, or 3 and just throw another literally 800, not 900 pounds, $1 million worth in the US of herring over it and just watch them eat for like hours and hours. And then the other boat would be doing the same thing. And, I think what it speaks to is like the lack of pressure. It's like, that's definitely a thing, but there's also so many tuna fish. And, it's
the perfect recipe there.
It really is.
It is.
The bait, lack of pressure. It's hard. I mean, it's hard for a big population of people to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the trucking, even like again, those logistics of it, it's like, if you can't, find the right the right dealer in the right way of, it's like, from where we were to Yarmouth or to Halifax, either way, it was like, you're talking an hour or two, hour and a half. It's there's a lot going on there that limits the ability, but like what's just so crazy though is to be out there and surrounded, and there's a hotel right inside that's a really people are sitting there having dinner, and you're just out there surrounded by, you're picking the one you want. And it's like, in one of the brothers, Joel, it's like when I went with him the first day, and I have just video after video after video of him cocked, and he's like, if you see him, he's like, wouldn't want to get in a fight with him. He's like wiry, strong, but like it's about as narrow as the harpoon. He's like tall, narrow guy.
Yeah.
Strength of like, I don't know how he did it. Held the harpoon for like an hour before he threw it. It's like, and they had fish under him the whole time, and it's like it was like crazy because you're sitting there, you can see cars going, and it's like, and it's like, what else is out there? And so it's like, I know like, Canada, it's nice to have connections up there. It's like, you guys were obviously there years before I do. And it's something that I really can't explain why. It's like, I'm actually looking forward to that almost more than
I know
like
season.
My season.
Don't you feel like it's almost like you're so stressed about tuna fishing?
That's what I
Around
think.
here.
So, around here, there's
Everything's
just so much. It's
yeah.
awesome. I love it.
Yeah, but
I love it. It's but you just have this, just this stress, this intensity, and then you get
is
up
stressful.
there, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, come right over. I'll throw a chum for you. Drop a hook. Oh, you're under my boat. No worry. Pass your rod over. Come get on this side." And the tone is the same no matter what is.
Yeah,
going on.
and it's like this guy Camille, who's my, he's like our age, he's 40, and it's like, and the funny thing is too, when you're in Canada, it's like it was hockey tryouts in like September, which is like funny because Massey thinks like even we don't do that. It's like, so hockey is just as big as tuna there,
Yeah.
but like, so the whole time it's just funny because like hockey and tuna and lobster to life, but it's like, here's one of the most intense people, but he's laid back, and it's like, but deep down he's hard to go, or like these guys fish hardcore winter lobster, but it was nice to be around that lack of the stress is definitely real. I mean, I like stress, but it's like, let's be honest, our fishery here with the amount of boats, it's like, it's stressful, and it's like, it's even in Maine where there's less boats, it's I think that's just the way it is. So it is part of it that you're doing something different, you're going somewhere else. Yeah. And there's no doubt that Canada, like, I'll just never forget, there was a stop sign in town, it was like a 4-way stop, and like everyone would not only wait, so it's like everyone would come to their stop fully, and then one car would go, and once that fully exited, the next person would go. And like in here, you watch people do, even just the way people drive, walk around. It's like, it's definitely a different culture.
It really is.
It's intense but laid back. But I think the moral of that story is like, unfortunately not everyone can go to Canada, but it's like, if you can get there,
Well, it's like anything
a life
you're
experience.
You're super passionate about, right? Like, to keep it on the same page with fishing. If you are an avid white marlin fisherman on the East Coast, like you want to go travel somewhere where you're going to have hundreds of shots at a similar size billfish to perfect your craft. That's Canada's kind of that for bluefin.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, I'm not saying like our fishery isn't amazing and we haven't seen some incredible fishing in the last decade, but it's just the shit that you see in such a short period of time, just the fish behavior.
But just
and
the thing that I think about is like
crazy.
they're all down at 10 fathom, 12 fathom, and you're in like 18 fathom. Like one day I didn't go, they were in 8 fathom, but it was like they were in like, you know, like the way they're all down at 12, 11 fathoms, and then something triggers them to go to like 8, and then something triggers them to all be at 6. And they're probably down there picking off your bait as it sinks.
Well, it's like in a competitive feed with that big of a herd of fish, you get to see it happen.
Right, and so
From the fish finder to visual,
Right.
you
I'll
see
never
the
forget when
competitive
they're like, let's
feed.
go around to the front. So they move, like they use the winch, they put all the herring on the front, and it's like, now granted, like these guys, you know, they're doing science too, they're tagging, it's like, tagging, there's rules on catch and release, but, you know, you just throw a line in, it's like, you would put black spray paint on the leader, and they're so frenzied that they'd bite
matter.
it. I have videos of it, just like 8 seconds, boom, gone. And it's like, you know, you're just cleaning for 2 hours and you throw a hook on. So they're frenzied in general, but like when they came up, it's just like the thing I remember the most is like watching them come up. It's weird. It's just like what makes the tuna, like you realize how complicated these fish are. They're very complex fish. That's kind of the heart of why science is so hard, is they're simple but complicated. And to see the behaviors that they had, but that, you know, when they would be like, it's around time to go front, you're like, you know, the first time you see that, you're like, what do you mean? And then you look up front and they're just jumping under the stand. Like,
It's crazy.
it was like kind of something, you know, and I think if we had, you know, I'm sure that there's places, you know, but I think what we have here is like, you know, it's diluted because of the amount of boats, and so you don't see that type of thing. But, you know, the amount of fish we have is no less. It's just, it's a different nature. And, you know, I think what I hope we can, you know, through, you know, so it sounds like, you know, obviously we think there's a lot of fish now, and it's like, you know, and so, you know, there's that thing we always got to make sure people know. It's like our group, we're not trying to like, so the classic model of like hiring a scientist to go to the assessment to try to cook the books for you. No, it sounds horrible, but that's kind of the model. You know, one side hires this scientist, one side hires. It's like, we're not doing that. Just to be clear, it's like, you know, but I'm just confident that right now it's like the science would show. And, you know, I think what you're seeing in the U.S. is we have a problem. There's so many fish that, you know, that we don't have any way. It's like, let's be honest, when there's this many fish, they're too easy to catch. There's no way to really manage us.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, I'm not saying like you cull the herd, but it's like proper management would allow for both ways to have the right amount, closer amount to your quotas. And, you know, people are quota hawks. Like I know people that would go to meetings when we weren't catching anything and they just be like, we need 10,000 tons. And it's like, I'd be like, you know, I've never been like that. And I'm not saying what we should have, but you need to have enough science to like match up to what you're having, because what you see in Canada is what we have here. And it's like, but they don't see that. And so it's like, you know, I think a lot of our frustration in the US comes from the fact that, you know, the quotas don't match the reality. And it's like, what's scary to me is that, you know, if you can't see this pulse of fish, how are you going to see a problem? Like, and I'm not saying there's going to be a problem, but when you've got it's like, remember again, back to where we started, the other side of the ocean is catching 45,000 metric tons this year. Now, 30 something thousand of that is pen fish. Now, the way they count those in large part is they put cameras on the, you know, when they transfer them. And then they use like random samples, like, and there's questions like, did they, you know, let's say you fatten a fish up in a pen by a third. It's like, that's the weight that should count. You know, we don't weigh our fish, you know, 3 months before they get here.
Yeah.
When they're, you know, we weigh them when they're fat. And so it's like, you know, you have 30 or 40,000 metric tons, a third, a big difference. So it's like, there, you know, you go to meetings and you hear like, people are wondering like, oh, I hope we're getting that right. And it's like, yeah, me too. And it's like, and then, and so I learned in herring that when there's like, when you get to those numbers, you know, that there's just cheating becomes, it's like, you know, they would say things at herring meetings like, you know, I would hear a story about 900,000 pounds being dumped. And I'd tell that to someone, they'd be like, so what? The quota is like 100,000 tons. It's like, you know, it's like, it's still 1 million pounds of herring that got dumped, you know, and it's like, the higher the numbers get, it's like, so, you know, we need to be able to know what's going on both ways. And so,
Yeah.
you know, that's where it's like, it's a pain in the butt to do the science we're doing. But like, I think, you know, when you see what we're seeing out here, it's like, it gives you the energy to keep fighting it. And it's like, but I will say, like, just to cap off that Canada thing, it's like, if I told them, and I still say it, it's like, if you guys need, like, I'm not sure how I do like lobstering in the winter. It's like that. I'm not gonna lie. That's like
It's getting ready to move.
It's like I'm just saying, like, that's like, I'm not used to the ocean offshore in the winter. It's like, so it's like, I'm not trying to be a wuss, but it's like, but like really
not a fucking chance. I could. I mean,
it's just it's
scary. I'm confident enough to say that myself. I don't know if I would last very long.
No, I don't think
seeing
I would.
them jump,
even locally,
seeing them jump in like the heat closet where they keep their grundins in between sets. And
so where we were in Canada,
they have sinks in their boat, not to wash their shit, but to get their fucking hands warm.
Yeah, it's like
in between home.
would you do it for X amount more money though? That's the thing.
Crazy part is they get like 90. So like this year, there was actually some issues in the lobster fishery up there, but like, on an average year, it's like they get, like one of them told me like 90% of their annual income in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They'll get like, you'll see pictures of like 25,000 pounds.
That's the majority of pretty much every fisherman's income up there, at least speaking for PEI. Yeah. It's like lobster makes their entire year.
It makes the whole thing. And so I don't think I could hack, but it's like, it's like I have days where I'm just like, if I didn't have family around here and I didn't have anything going on, it's like I just would move to Nova Scotia. It's like I just liked it there. But, I think, part of what's going on is also like when you have this many fish, it makes it hectic. It's part of the reason it's hectic. I mean, I saw the video you sent me when you were out with Jeff. You're coming home with one, and it's like, I honestly thought it was land when I first saw it. It looked like Hampton, like the New Hampshire
in the fleet in December,
Yeah, or like Boston, and, I think whether, I hear stories that, they've probably always been here in December, and like we were saying, they might never leave. But, it's like, you're never going to have any impact on how many fishermen there are, but it's like the amount of fish you have and how easy they are to catch. It's like what you're seeing right now is what happens when quotas don't match reality. And it's like, and I'm not, again, a quota hawk, and our group's not in this to just get more quota, but it's like, if you have it's what people need to understand is if you have better science, it's like you will have a better fishery. And it's like, and I know people like think like, well, what if you had more quota? Like, where would they go? Well, marketing's not my job. It's like, that's not, and like people need to take better care of their fish. So I'll say,
you think if we had more quota, it would fix the whole like, pricing that we're receiving on these things? Or you just think that the market's so diluted with fish because there's so many fish?
Well, part of it's too that there's a lot of big ones. It's like, we've had years, like a lot of years where we couldn't get away from, so we have in the harpoon category, we have like 0 to 4 large mediums, but it's always 2. So it's like, we've had years like that year I was telling you, like where every day we'd go out and get 2 large mediums and it's basically have to go home because there was only sub 80-inch fish. It's amazing how those limits, like it's crazy. Like you'll find the mother load of 73 to 80s, but you can't find an 84. But it's like, smaller fish are just inherently easier to sell. I mean, having this many 100+ inch fish, not only do they take longer to get fat, the herring issues, obviously, I always would plug that. You need good food. And we're getting there. We're slowly getting there. We all got to pay attention to herring because in fisheries history, like, a lot of times, like when a fleet gets cut, it's like there's no one that goes to the meetings anymore. Like I haven't been to a herring meeting in a while, but it's like all along, they're the lobbyists for the herring midwater fleet are there, and that's not a gear that, and I'll say it every till I'm blue in the face, shouldn't be allowed anywhere on earth. Talk about like them and wind farms. It's like talk about how you decimate. That's one of the things we're dealing with is a lack of herring. It's like pogies are great, but it doesn't fatten them up like herring. And so, but there are so many fish, and they're big fish. I think if you were fishing the right amount over time, whatever that means, I mean, resource management tells you you'd have a healthier herd, which would be more fish in that, like I was thinking the other day, like, this isn't like a plug for like, let's, again, it's like the science is like, my role in this group is just to bring scientists together and raise money for their science. So it's like, I have no impact, but it's like, I still can wonder, it's like, what happens to a fish? Like, how does a tuna die if it doesn't get caught? Like, I'm not saying like we're here as humans to like protect the ocean by killing fish before, but like it almost feels like there's some, one of the things that's going on in my opinion is the slope sea, which is the spawning area off the East Coast. My dad was joking actually one day that, climate change, like whatever your belief is on, it's all, the water has been warmer.
There's always been change in the climate.
Yeah, but the water is definitely warmer. Yeah. We see warmer water, and tuna like to breed in warm water. And so I asked the people in Miami, like one of the top guys, I was like, my dad always says this crazy thing, like, what if warming oceans means more tuna? He's like, it's funny, we talk about that all the time. He said, like, we think that billfish and tuna will be the winners in a warming ocean because tuna look for that warm ocean. So it feels to me like we have closer spawning, more spawning. I mean, the more warm water, the more habitat.
The less they have to travel
The
to
less they have to
spawn,
travel.
the healthier they are when they spawn.
And like, so you have these cycles of fish that could just be spawning, like the dynamic nature of what's going on. So like, instead of just counting them, we also have to learn about where they spawn. So it's like, we can't get into all the science. People can go to the website. It's just Bluefin Collaborative, bluefincollaborative.org. It's like, we're still growing, but it's like, if you look into the research stuff, you'll learn more if you care about like maturity, about life, where they spawn, how they spawn. But really we're not getting any of it right. And so it's like, there's more to it than just counting them. But it's like, if you can't count them, you can't do anything. So
there's also the aspect, when we're saying it now, the constant change. It's hard to even stay up on top of it. And we're,
right,
coming, and to say that from out of our mouths, doing it every day and living it and seeing it.
Yep, it's complex.
You can get it tighter and tighter and tighter, but it's way too big of an animal.
And I said, I remember I went to a meeting, and again, a lot, like 99% of the scientists aren't in this, like the ones, it's not like the science community has been trying to get this wrong, or there are some people that I would love to have never seen get approved to be a NOAA scientist, and it's like, I'm not afraid to say that. It's like, I've just seen things that like shocking. Part of the reason I want to start a science group is because like, that's not science, what I've seen, it's politics. It's like, there are scientists that are political, and but the newer generation, it's like, I've sensed want to get it right. And so it's like the majority of them just don't have the data. Like if you're sitting in Miami, and it's like, that's why the Northeast Center has kind of led the way on some things, because they're closer. You've got great guys like Dave Richardson who went out and found the larvae in the slope sea, but it's like, that's just just like barely getting into what we don't know. So it's like, to your listeners, it's like, as much as you said it, it's like those of us, I've been around them my whole life. It's like, I've tried to learn everything I can. It's like, I still feel like I know less sometimes than I know more. It's like, all I know is that they're complicated. And I was at a meeting once, and it's kind of like where you could leave the science talk, it was like all of the world's scientists, like in Fort Lauderdale. And it was like, I sat there for like a whole day listening to people talk about how simple everything was. Like, there's this line and they just turn around and they only do this. And I just stood up and said, like, I've seen more tuna in a day than you'll all see in your life. And let me just tell you, the first rule of tuna is they're complicated. Now, my dad will tell me that that's simple. Like, they're complicated and they're simple. It's like they're moving all the time. They're hard to see. It's like, it's complicated. But they're also simple. So it's like, it's a little bit of both. But really, when you look at it from the science perspective, it's like, if there's all these areas where they spawn, if they spawn by age, they spawn by water temp, it's like, it's easier, though, to have this clean-cut, two-stock thing where scientists that are already stretched thin, don't have budgets. The whole bluefin research program from NOAA is $700,000. It's like, our group alone, we're going to try to raise $1 million a year. So it's like, that's just, that's sad if our group can beat the whole U.S. And we're working to try to educate Congress. We can't do much more than just tell them what's going on, to get more money. But it comes back to money, and but really, it's like, I think everyone's frustrated right now that's been in this fishery a long time, because it feels like look at September, look at October. It was like a matter of days. December, a few days. Like January, one was caught on Jeffries. It's like, and they're in, like, once the weather goes by North Carolina, I'm told it'll be over in a few days. It's like, they're everywhere. And, it's like, I think what we need is, like, it's not always going to be that way, but it's like, why science is worth doing. And it's like, you guys, like, again, I just want to thank you. It's like, it's a pain in the butt to do what you guys do. I see your videos of your coffee videos. I saw the machine downstairs. It's like, make me want to buy one. It's like, but you get up early, it's like, and you guys work your butt off, and it's like, you deal with, and I don't mean deal with charters, but there's a whole nother layer to what you guys do, where it's like customer service, and you can't just fucking break the gaff over the rail and yell at getting a blowout with your dad. You got people paying to be there. And so it's like, it's a lot of work what we do, and it's like, science is not easy. And it's like, for you guys, I saw, I know what you guys do, and And you guys never run out of energy with all, and they learned just how much you guys know about.
You gotta stay busy to stay alive if you're
That's what we need. And so it's
pursue
like,
fishing.
It's like, and I think there's a lot of people, and I've met some young people, which is really heartening. There's a couple guys out of like Seabrook in the Wentworth. They're like 18, 20, and they're like already ringers. Like they're already like get one every day they go. And it's like, they half my age now. It's like, I'm 42. Yeah. It's like, oh my God, this guy's 19 or 20. And he's already like really, really good. But that generation gets science. It's like, and you guys get it. And it's, I think some people get like bitter about, quotas going fast. And, my dad always says like, I wish we'd started this science effort 20, 30 years ago. It's like, now we got to do it. And so it's like, but the good news is that like, we do have a lot of fish. It is a pain sometimes because of the market. I mean, with the marketing stuff, it's like, I think herring's just as important as anything. I think, dealers.
Bait in general is just as important.
Bait, and I think, I'm not afraid to say.
Because I do feel like, to your point, the bigger, healthy, perfect tunas find the herring. I agree, herring's their favorite thing to eat, but I also think that they're willing to adapt.
Oh yeah,
shit that we're seeing on the pogies.
Oh yeah. They've
never tinker mackerel,
sand eels, tinker mackerel.
I mean, they'll eat sand eels.
It's just bait. It's just forage in general.
Bait, and and that's when you see what's going on with fish following, I can't imagine that a scallop cutting is what tuna would ideally eat. So when I hear of 500 or 1,000 fish under a single scalloper.
So here's my theory on that. Is to our points earlier about the fish going east and coming back in tight to feed. I think that's just their fucking holdover meal until they're ready to go back in and eat those bunker again.
Yeah, because it's
especially down off Point Judith and
that seems like
the squid boats and all that. It's like they're coming out, find a dragger, they're milling, doing their thing. They come back in, they destroy the bait. They go out and they do it again.
Yeah, and it's like they're I hate to say that. I mean, it sounds like lions. They're the same way. Hawks. Like some of the biggest predators on earth are lazy because they're trying to get fat, and so it's like having a snack. We always wonder what's going on out like in Murray's in Mayo Swell because like you don't see that many. But I started to feel like I wonder if they're eating squid or something, because they're always on these little. That one year they were always on these humps that were only like 100 foot. It's like 800 versus 900. But they were always on these rings. It's like, what the hell? It's like, are they eating something that's digesting? Or like, what are they doing out here? But it's like, I think the kind of thing that you got to leave your listeners with is like, no matter what you think about the markets, no matter what you think about, competition, no matter anything, it's like, we have to, as an industry, lead the science because like, again, it's like if you have better science, you'll have better managed resource. And it's like, and then that science like helps because when it comes to herring, like when I was in the herring bat, it's like what pisses me off still is like, I would be told that we don't, like there was, for example, no fishing in the Great South Channel in the 90s. Now, like when I was in like, I was young and I couldn't keep fishing and like, we didn't go down there anyways, but there was a fishery my whole childhood in like October, November, where everybody would go down to the Great South Channel and just hammer fat tuna coming up, puking up herring spawn. Mm-hmm. That was the first place that the middle-order boats wiped out. And it got to the point where we go to meetings and there's no data to show that. So it's like we've gotten into complicated genetics, complicated everything, but it comes down to simple things like the logbooks you guys are filling out with the fin clips. That's data like that shows we've fished somewhere. We don't have that. Like
even just showing the organization of ourselves as fishermen, being able to just do a process like that should be, at least the value in itself of being like, all right, they're professional and they have their shit together. Yeah. So basically what we're getting at, and I think this is a good place to kind of segue / wrap her up.
Yeah, we could go forever.
Is if you are one of those, if you do this for fun, you do this for a bit, your main business, your secondary business, whatever, get involved. Get a kit, do it.
Yeah, and follow you.
The more data we have, the better. And if you're unfamiliar with how to release fish or how to do it, and we'd be glad to help educate. And I know we've talked about that, and as it kind of evolves and the website, builds out, we can.
Yeah, well, you guys are going to
do shit like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's like, it's like that's, and it's like keep in mind, like just to be clear, it's like we're a new organization. You guys have been there from the get go, and it's like, but it's like a nonprofit. Like you look at the Billfish Foundation, they're around for like. They're like kind of fully built out, like everyone in the South, everyone that cares about billfish look at what they've built with the Billfish Foundation, and it's like it's a thing. It's like it's a big thing. Like it's huge. Just their tags are huge.
There's hooks certified by them. Like the
Yeah,
point
it's
where
wild.
there's tackles certified
They're like
by
the
a
closest
nonprofit.
thing, you know.
100%.
And then you have the fun side of it, of like you can have tournaments, you can have galas, you can have, but like our industry as you know, what you just said, I think is really important. Is what I've noticed just from my history. Like I my first meeting, I was still in college. It was the Midwater Trawl Amendment 1. I went in and like everyone told me like don't ever say like as much as you like. I was like never knew what you were supposed to say to Mike, and I wasn't like horrible, but it was like clearly a little like everyone's like you shouldn't say it like don't say that directly to them. They're gonna go, you know. It was like I learned lessons over the years, you know, and it's like, you know, I mean, it was like over time, it's like what I've found is that like, you know, and I've been really impressed with the generation, the 40, you know, the new, I would say the new, we're all getting older. It's like the newer generation of people down in Miami, which has always been like, just again, for reference, like when you talk to like the old timers, that's like Miami, screw Miami. It's like, they've always been out to get us because that's who is principally leading the science and NOAA for tuna. And so we call it Miami. And it's like, but like, I've noticed that like, I'm shocked at how like when you go into it and you're like the Bluefin Collaborative, it's like everyone calls things collaboratives. No, we named it that because that's anyone that wants to collaborate, except wind farms. I'm gonna get in trouble for that, but except for like wind farm, no, I'm joking. We're not gonna ever take money from, you know. It's like I'm not leading the group, but it's like I have my own opinions. It's like objective. If you're truly objective and you truly, but what I've been shocked at and really heartened by is like, you know, I was worried we would go into this and NOAA would think we're coming to like make them look bad. And in fact, it's like, it's gotten to the point where like we're friends, like we talk all the time, and it's like they tell us what they need. They're encouraging us to do this. It's like whether it's gonads, like the ovaries, like that show that they're mature, or the fin clips, like we're being encouraged by the people that in the older generation thought were enemies. It's like we're actually being encouraged to do this. And you know what you're doing, and we're talking to scientists all over academia. It's like what you've collected, what other people have collected, and what we're doing. Just this simple pilot project is like, it's showing them that we mean business, but it's showing them that we are trying to be professional and we're working hard to be scientific. And it's like, I think we're going to get much further. You know, there's not going to be that contentious relationship. And, you know, within our fishery, we have a lot of people. There's bad apples everywhere that are going to say, screw science, and I don't want to deal with that. That's a pain in the ass. But we have a lot of good people, and we can produce so much data. And then the last thing I will say is that, remember, that bluefin is the most public of all of these things. But one of the things that happened, and you know, and I know we're wrapping up, but just because I know you've got listeners that don't just do bluefin. You know, I was talking to Dave Masako the other day, and it's like he was telling me, you know, it's like how much he cares about yellowfin and big eye, and it's like we deal with fishermen and like this guy Dewey Hemmerwright, who's one of our better samplers in North Carolina. You know, and you know he catches bluefin, but you know the longline fleet loves to get big eye yellow. So it's like they know even less about big eye and yellowfin. And what's scary is that when the whole world was trying to say stop eating bluefin, you notice they started putting yellowfin or big eye on every menu there was. Well, guess what's happening now? It's like it's an absolute bloodbath off of Africa and the Gulf of Guinea, where I heard a stat, and this was at an ICAT meeting, that one year they caught like 30, so the quota is like 60,000 tons on big eye. And I don't know if I heard it wrong. It's like I just want to pretend like I heard it wrong, but what was said at the meeting was like, as we were getting a report, was in one of the recent years, half of the quota, so 30,000 tons or so, was under the minimum size, and the minimum size is 6 pounds. All right, and when they're that small, you really can't tell the difference between a big eye. So it's like what's going on off of Africa is like it's this year's ICAT meeting. The biggest thing was they call them tropical tunas. It was big eye, it was the big one, and it's another situation where our fishermen were really, really close to getting a cut, as the other side of the ocean almost got a 10. So it was going to be a 10,000 ton increase. So we're around 1,500. We're what they call like an artisanal small, like a small scale fishery. And it's like, but at the same time, our longline fleet is working really hard to develop gear. The deep, the deep drop fishing has led to deep drop longlining.
Yeah.
And it turns out they're getting more big eye and bigger, like sense. Better swordfish. And so it's a really good development because it allows them to avoid bluefin, which has been a pain in the ass for them. And so what I would just leave, make sure is like, we're starting with bluefin. It's like what we care about. But, it's like the things we're trying to do here is build like an understanding of how you assess other tunas too. And it's like the big eye is just as big a problem. Yellowfin's just as big a problem. It's like in those fisheries, because of the campaign to stop eating bluefin, open the door to like.
It's just funny too how that's just come full circle. Now we have such a surplus of these things, and they still don't want to market it domestically.
Right, and it's like it's I think that's someone asked me today. It's like they were talking about the marketing part of it, and it's like the Bluefin Collaborative is obviously not going to be a marketing, but it's like I think as an industry, I would, there's many ways that can happen, and it's like I think that is a big part of it is marketing, but it's crazy though, but it's like what we do here can help. No, I always caveat it with swordfish seem to me like to be so complicated. I'm not convinced they'll be as, the tools we're doing will help with swordfish, but certainly big eye and yellowfin and other tunas, they're all alike enough that if we learn how to count them and do these things, this could work for big eye. Because there's a lot of places where big eye and yellowfin are much more important than bluefin, and bluefin is just a bycatch species, like the whole mid-Atlantic. Yeah. Now some boats have bought up quota, but I guess like it's hard work. It's like you guys honestly, like, again, I'm not just saying this because I'm on your podcast. It's like you guys work really hard at this, and it's like as we move along, it's like we all appreciate people like yourselves that go above and beyond. But I think hopefully people will follow your lead. It's like our industry can be like a leader in this, and I think people will take us seriously. It's already happening. So, there's fundraising down the road. I'm not here to plug it for, we're working on setting up everything so that, but it's going to take a lot of money to do this right. But it's like, I think just getting a little bit involved now, helping build the data collection. And, if you go to Canada, just don't try to go when we're going because, it's like, just don't take up too much. Don't
we probably shouldn't have talked about it so much.
Well, I think, it's
just that impactful.
Well, it's you awesome. Kind of like when I text you when I was there, I will say, I think what it gets at is our love for, and I think people, maybe this is the good way to end, is like, we're not just in this, obviously we're not just in this for, money, people make money at this, but it's like, we have some connection to these fish that it's like hard to explain. And I think what you see up there is like, it shows you like that it's not just catching them and selling them or getting money for, it's like, there's something about them that's just amazing. I mean, they're so cool. They are. So, don't go to Canada though. And in hindsight, like don't go there, and nothing good there. But no, beautiful country, and
fishing's amazing.
Yeah,
the food's amazing too.
It's like really
everything. It was great. We do love it here though.
But I love Maine. It's like in Maine,
Maine. I'm a big Maine guy. I mean, I'm
surprised. I'm gonna say you need to get up. And, you should come up and hike and do some
next
stuff
time we go up there, we'll go do a hike somewhere.
Well, the coast of Maine is actually like probably the next level of it's very open. It's like I will say, and to anyone that wants to go fish it, good luck because it's a big place.
The amount of like just looking at a chart up there, I wouldn't even know where to. I know spots.
You could figure it out.
You could figure it out, but there's just so much epic bottom up there.
Yeah, it's like
it's like little knolls and like.
And the crazy part is people are fishing like Monhegan Island, for example, like 30 feet from the rocks. And it's like, let me tell you, there's plenty of them 30 miles outside of there. And, but then you get past Monhegan and it's like, no one, it's like there are a few people, but, I just know that one of the best planes, he's still around. He's doing a lot of great white, Wayne Davis. Story always is like the most, he's so secretive. So I won't say the exact place, but, one of the hardest places to reach within 50 miles of land off Maine, in the middle of nowhere, was the most fish he's ever seen. And here's a guy that's been doing it. He's probably 70 something, 80. He might even be 80 now, and he's been doing it forever. Did it for seiners. Seen as many. I mean, we worked with his partner boat at one point, and just amazing pilot. And the most fish he ever saw anywhere was
off Maine,
about 100 miles east of Portland.
That's sick.
So it's like, but it's like the same thing goes for offshore. And again, we could go forever, but it's like. That's the other thing is people don't realize what's offshore. I mean, what we see out in Murray's and Mayo and Wilkinson's,
funny.
It's shocking.
This is going to be a good podcast guest dovetail because we have Brett Wilson tomorrow morning, and Brett's like one of the George's guys.
So Brett fishes with Anthony. Anthony Mandillo, who used to fish on the Cookie 2, who now runs 5 boats out of Ilomaharis, like. And I'll plug that. So you want to go have fun, you've probably done it. Sail fishing is like...
It's awesome.
It's freaking amazing. Yeah. But, they have... What a fishery they have off of... It's only 10 miles off Cancun.
But he fished.
But he fishes with Brett. And so Anthony also fishes in Nova Scotia.
Yep.
So he does the whole round. But Brett could tell you a lot of, he was out on George's when George's with nuts. I didn't know you had him tomorrow. Brett, he's been part of sampling, and he's a good fisherman that has seen a lot off. So we don't go south of probably the Highland. Like once we get south of P-Town, it's like we're 90 miles from home. So it's like, and then the Cape is a really hard place to go into. So it's like theoretically,
and you could drive 90 plus miles and just be in pea soup fog for
it's like what's happened. It's like, but Brett could, what's fascinating, and this would be the segue is somewhere, what I read off the Chatham is it's one of the most dynamic fishery. The bluefin situation off of like the Cape and the islands, it's some sort of transit highway entrance. Something's going on there because it's just so dynamic. And Brett can tell you about that tomorrow. But it's like you'll have you could probably get him to tell you some stories. But he'll cover the Cape South. But I think I really appreciate being here. Like I said, I think I did okay.
You did a great job.
Great.
Yeah. Well, jokingly, it's like everyone says I talk too much. So, my wife always says I'm doing.
You're just full of wisdom.
You're obsessive.
Well,
You're
it's like
obsessive
I'm actually really obsessive. Like I'm in the I'm not the compulsive. I'm the obsessive. So it's like I just go on repeat.
It's a good thing though.
And that's why I do the meetings though. It's like because like I'll lay in bed at night and I'll just be like I can't skip the meeting. It's like we even though everyone says we're gonna win the vote, it's like I can't do it. It's like but it's I think that's what we need, and you guys are. Let me say, you guys are. Even though you're the quiet one, and you're more like me one. It's like you guys are both as hard a goers as it gets, and your dad might be. Mom actually might be the. When I met mom,
I'm a slower. I'm a fast thinker, but a slower.
Correct.
Slower out of mouther.
OG's more of a fast out of mouther.
And your mom
You're
might
fast
be,
out of mouther.
I'm a fast out of mouther.
Yeah.
My mom.
I listen and process.
She was telling, Well, there's the value to, it's like, and my wife's the opposite of me. She's like, she does the same thing. I'll be like, I'll say like 8:00 at night. Now we're going, but it'll be like, you haven't said anything yet. We drove to like,
we drove 4 hours.
We just did a hike up in Crawford Notch, and literally it's been 8 hours, and you haven't said anything. So and she'd be like, I didn't have anything to say.
Hey, I wish I had that problem.
Well, yeah. Well, anyways, let's I'll appreciate and maybe we can do we'll have to get more video and as people get in videos, like anything that you can do to help us, like spread the word on. As you do science, but go to the website. It's just literally bluefincollaborative.org.
We'll post it on the.
We put a lot of effort into that. It's like, boy, that was the hardest thing I ever did was doing a website. I mean, really, you got to be careful what you say. You have to get it. Anyways, it came out good, but it's a work in progress, and this is the beginning of this. It's like we got a lot ahead, and anyone that's willing and eager, but and then watch the Sears Mass Bay Guides reels because you can get some good insight on how to handle fish, and I think eventually we should have a class on how to do it.
I think we'll just probably use some of our footage and narrate over it.
Yeah, you guys know how to do it. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate your leadership.
Thanks for coming
on this
down.
whole thing. Thanks for coming down.
I have to say, you guys are leading too. So, and then once we get one in or both, get one of you on the.
You'll get interaction from this.
You definitely.
Well, you guys have been. It's like, and I'm not trying to pick on the older generation, but it's time for our generation to have an impact, and so it's like by that I mean. Probably like the 50s.
I feel it. I feel that in my bones. We've both been asked by a few people we won't, mention here on the podcast to get more involved. So I think it's time.
Well, I think it's our time, and I think we bring a new perspective, and we're not as jaded because it's been a long fight, and into the old.
A lot's changed in the last 10 and 20 years.
Yeah, science is the way. It's like and to do science, you just find the best scientists, and you get the most samples, and you raise money. It's let the scientists do the science. So anyways, in the meantime, we'll go home dreaming about tunas. And
we're going to dream about... First, we're going to eat venison chili, and then we're going to dream about tunas. But actually, the first thing I'll do is I'll send us off on our dad's 3 words of fishing wisdom. Remember, you can't catch them if you don't have a hook in the water. Always trust your instincts. And the last one, you have to keep listening. Stay tight, everybody.
Shut up and look for fish.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much for tuning in to the SeaBros Fishing Podcast. If you would like more information about today's guest, our episode, and show sponsors, or if you want to order hats and apparel, please visit our website at SeaBrosFishing.com. You can also stay up to date on all the latest SeaBros Fishing content and podcast episodes by following us on Instagram at SeaBros Fishing. Finally, to book a trip with us through our family-run charter fishing company, please visit massbayguides.com or see our latest updates and fishing reports by following Mass Bay Guides on Instagram and Facebook.